that we do a little brief intro of everyone. We could just go around and say your name, and if you have a particular role that you represent, of the roles that we need to fill, share that. And if you want to say anything else about why you're here, why this is important, I think that would be great. Before we do that, let me just recognize that we have, in addition to the committee members in the room, we have a number of guests here from the district. We have John Niblin from the San Mateo County Council or Attorney's Office, who's going to speak. I think you're the first item on the agenda after we get through this, and the approval of the agenda and the public comment, if there is any. So thank you, all of you who come and support the committee and the work that we're trying to do here. So let me start out. I'm Carl Landers, and I'm serving as the chair right now. And I'm I think coming up on my second year on the committee in the fall, if I have that right. I joined the committee. I have two children, a third grader and a fifth grader in the district. And I remember distinctly my application that I sent to Dr. Baker, and I wrote in there, as a marketing person by profession, I said, look, we're doing all this great work in the district, building new buildings, and like, how can we do a better job of getting the word out to the taxpayers of how their money's being spent? Because we're all, as if you're a taxpayer here, your money's being spent, and for the next, I don't know how many years, will be on this great work. And so I said, I think I can help on the committee with my marketing background, and that's what brought me to this. So, and happy to be participating. So, Vice Chair.
Hi, I'm Jen Givens.
Oh, don't forget to turn on your mics too when you're speaking. If you, yeah, that one. If it's red, you're on. Yep.
Thank you. I'm Jen Givens, Vice Chair of the committee. I have a first grader and a fourth grader at two schools in the district. Currently, I'm can you hear me?
Oh. Now we know why we pay you the big bucks.
Yeah, we've done this before. I'm a civil engineer turned construction project manager, currently working at Stanford University. So familiar with construction, infrastructure, upgrades, renovations, demolitions, and ground up.
Oh. Hi, I'm Cameron Hoffman. I have two students in the district right now, a sixth grader and a third grader, and I also have a little guy who will likely matriculate into the district. And I serve on the committee in the role of being in school leadership, so I'm on a site council of a district school as well.
Great, thank you. We'll just work our way, I guess, this way, if you want to go next, Carolyn, and then come back around.
My name is Carolyn Chow. I don't have any children in the district, but I am a lifelong Redwood City resident. Very proud to be part of the district. Went to school in this district, so this is very meaningful to me, and I'm very happy to be part of this committee.
And you are our taxpayer
Yes,
representative?
I am a member of the taxpayer organization, so that is my role.
Thank you.
I'm Japal Sahai. I'm a citizen in the Redwood City District. I've got two kids in the school district. I've got a fourth grader and a second grader. I'm on site council at one of the schools in the district. I'm also a volunteer soccer coach. So for one of the schools in the district. So it's an honor to be on this committee. It's nice to see where taxpayers' money is going, and hopefully we're doing better for our community.
Hi, I'm Carl Metz. I'm the member at large on the committee, and I also have two children within the district, one in TK and then the other in third grade. And my background is in architecture and program management and asset management. So when this announcement came out, I thought this would be a great opportunity to help the community. So thanks for letting me on.
Hi, I'm Rodney Leach. I have two children, one a second grader and one a preschooler entering TK in the fall. I'm also an architect, so interested, in seeing how the process on the public side, and have a little bit of background in this as well to help.
Thank you. Jacqueline, I think you're our last
Gracias.
member.
Sí, gracias. Mi nombre es Jacqueline Rodríguez. Estoy contenta de participar aquí representando pues a los padres de la comunidad escolar de Redwood City. Sí, que ya se puede traducir. Claro, gracias.
She says she's happy to
Hey,
represent
oh.
the parents. Oh, she says she's happy to represent the parents of Redwood City.
Mi hija asiste a Hoover en el 8º grado
She has an
y
eighth
mi
grade
niño
daughter.
de los más pequeñitos, ¿no? Apenas en preescolar y me gusta participar en estas reuniones porque conozco de la importancia de involucrar a los padres y que conozcan cómo se gestionan los recursos para la mejor educación de los niños.
Me puede ayudar?
Sí, sí, sí.
She says she has an eighth grader and a student in preschool and she, ¿qué más dijo? Que
Estoy feliz de que los
she's
padres
happy to participate
conozcan de
so that
cómo
parents,
se gestionan los recursos para la mejor
so that
educación de los
the
niños.
parents can know how the resources are spent.
Ujú.
Great. Well, welcome. I think this is your first meeting, so thank you.
Creo que es la tercera, pero las otras fueron por Zoom. Entonces es la
Oh,
primera aquí.
Oh,
First in person. Yes, thank you.
She did the other.
Yes, thank you.
Sí.
Okay, did we miss anyone? I think we got the entire committee because we did have a resignation. And it's worth mentioning Raquel Gonzalez, who was a committee member, did submit her resignation earlier this week. She said she was really busy with a new job and wouldn't be able to serve. So that leaves us with 8 seated members and still 11, I think, allocated members from the board. So I believe we have on the agenda later to talk about filling out the rest of the committee. And so we can hear if there's any update from the district on that. So I just want to remind the public, if there's any public, that we are very much representing the public here. It's our job to provide public oversight on the spending of the bond money, and we're very much open to public input. And we're happy to take it during the public comment section that's coming up, but also in any of the sections where we have discussion or action. We always welcome the public input. And I know personally, I'm happy to receive it offline as well, as I'm sure the other committee members would be. So I always want to emphasize that we represent you out there. And so if you're listening, please share your questions or comments. The last thing that I want to do is just quickly remind, since this is, I think the first time we've had all of the committee members together in person, what our duties are. And we're going to talk about the revised bylaws here in a minute, but from our current bylaws, I think it's worth just reminding the committee of why we're here and what we're supposed to do. So I'm just going to read through some of the highlights, so bear with me. In the bylaws, it says the committee shall ensure that bond revenues are expended only for the purpose described in the Constitution. I am paraphrasing a bit. So that's number 1. And ensure that the bond revenues are not used for teacher and administrative salaries or other school operating expenses. So those are the 2 duties listed. The bylaws then go on to say that there are activities that the committee can carry out or should carry out as part of these duties. And they are to receive and review copies of the annual independent financial and performance audits. And that's actually going to happen tonight. Or you have them already, but we'll review them tonight for the last fiscal year. Inspect school facilities and grounds, receive and review copies of any deferred maintenance proposals or plans by the district, and then finally review efforts by the district to implement cost-saving measures in these 5 areas. 1, professional fees. 2, cost of site preparation. 3, joint use of core facilities. Number 4, efficiencies in school site design. You architects out there. And then number 5, the use of cost-effective and efficient reusable facility plans. So those are the activities that we as a committee can carry out in order to ensure the bond funds are properly spent. So hopefully that's a helpful refresher. Actually, John's going to do a presentation and take questions on maybe a little bit more detail on general CBOC responsibilities coming up here. The agenda is a bit new. We've got some new topics on there. So why don't we go right into item 2 on the agenda, which is the agenda review. Committee members, you have the agenda in front of you. Does anyone want to propose any changes to tonight's agenda? All right, no changes heard. Let's move to the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
And a second? Okay, all in favor of the approval of tonight's agenda? Aye. And anybody against? Okay, so we have approval on tonight's agenda, which takes us then nicely into section 3, which is our public comment section. So this is if anyone here in the room or on Zoom would like to share anything with the committee that's not on the agenda tonight, we certainly would be welcome to hear it. Any public comment? Olivia, anyone on Zoom? I would say that it's probably not the time for a committee member to bring that up, but we can certainly, I think we'll have opportunities to share those during some of the updates that are coming. Thank you. Is there anyone on Zoom, Olivia, that's got their hand up or no? Okay. Wishful thinking. All right. So with no public comment, then we can move into item 4. We've got 2 guest presentations tonight. We've moved these up to earlier in the agenda so we can be respectful of our guest time. So John Niblin from the San Mateo County Council's office is here. And John did a presentation for the Board of Trustees, excuse me. Sorry, Janet, the Board of Trustees a few weeks ago on the responsibilities, roles, and responsibilities of the CBOC. And so it was appropriate, certainly, to have John come and do an overview of that because I shared it with all of you. So hopefully you've seen it and take any questions from the committee members where John's expertise, and you probably work with many CBOCs across the district. I'm sure you'll share some of your bona fides here with us, but fire away, John. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here this evening. I am John Niblin. I'm the county attorney. It's kind of interesting. About 22 years ago, I started in the county attorney's office. It was the county counsel's office when I started. And during those 22 years, I've had the opportunity to represent, I think, just about every school district. No, I think I can say definitively every school district in the county in one capacity or another, and the County Office of Education and the County Board of Education. So I've thought pretty deeply about a lot of the stuff that school administrators and frankly, that's what CBOCs think about. I've had the opportunity to work with several CBOCs, primarily in the context of providing information about the roles and responsibilities of CBOCs and how CBOCs sort of interface and collaborate with the district to discharge their mandate of keeping the public informed of progress and district compliance with bond programs and the constitutional requirements around bond programs. So it's a privilege to be here. I'm a Pacifican myself. I actually have deep interest in the kind of work that you all do, being as we support a number of historically have supported a number of bond programs in Jefferson Union and Pacifica School District. So something I spend a lot of time thinking about and caring about myself. So I really appreciate the work that you all do here in this regard.
Can I pause you for one
Of
sec?
course.
Is there a way to get John on camera or is it not working?
Not with the presentation.
Oh.
They're not. Okay. So none of the cameras will record anyone this evening. Is that? But we are getting the audio recorded. Okay, great.
Well,
Thank you.
You'll have to just
Yeah.
bear with not
We'll
being able to
paste
see my photogenic
pictures.
presence. So people will suffer for that, I'm sure. So folks have had the opportunity, I know, to see this presentation. I do intend to move through it actually pretty quickly, but we've allocated a relatively limited amount of time, which I think is fine. I would, if you all have questions, I'd encourage you to, maybe I could stop here even initially and see if anybody has any kind of predicate questions they'd like to hit. Somebody, I think it was your chair, in fact, sent me 4 or 5 questions that I've kind of got loaded here and ready to go. But again, I'm happy to sort of work through kind of death by PowerPoint here, or alternatively, hear questions, or maybe both. I guess what I'll do then is I'll get started, and then as questions come up, we'll go ahead and hit them, and I'll go ahead and deal with the questions I have sort of on the list here at the end. So maybe I don't have a clicker, so maybe somebody could help me, whoever's got access to it, to advance the slides. Does anybody have access to it? Excellent. Prior to Prop 39, the world was different prior to Prop 39. Prior to Prop 39, in order to pass a school bond for facilities, you needed 2/3 vote. Prop 39 at the very highest level changed the voter threshold to bring the requirement down to 55%, in order to pass a bond. You can see that prior to Prop 39, it was pretty hard to pass a bond, relatively speaking. It was about 54% from 1986 to 1999. So again, it wasn't an easy lift, and school facilities suffered. Next slide. So what Prop 39 did, as I was noting, was that it actually amended the California Constitution to lower the threshold. And this is an option for school districts. School districts don't have to use the Prop 39 route, but when they do, it lowers the threshold constitutionally to 55% for approval of bonds that are used for school construction. And let's see here. There are certain limits that apply when you're dealing with these 55% Prop 39 bonds that speak to sort of the amount of indebtedness, or specific limits on the amount of indebtedness that you can incur under a Prop 39 bond. It goes to really sort of the total amount of assessed valuation of property within the district. I believe it's like 1.25% or something like that. And then as you all should hear embodying it, the Prop 39 imposes certain oversight provisions that don't apply to other kinds of bonds. So next slide, please. So the effect on the ground has been, as I think you all who are close to it know, the effect on the ground has been to increase pretty dramatically the passage rate for school facility bonds. Took a look as I was putting this together a few weeks ago at EdSource, and I ascertained that 71 out of the 101 school bond measures that were on the ballot in November of 22 passed. So that's again primarily a function of the lower threshold that exists under the law. Next slide, please. So, one of the, again, speaking to sort of the special oversight measures that apply in Prop 39, what is required when a Prop 39 bond passes is the governing board of the school district establish and appoint members to an independent citizens bond oversight committee. And it's supposed to happen within 60 days of the certification of the election results. And so that's why you all are sitting here. Next slide. And as your chair had kind of gone through, and as you all had sort of kind of gone through yourselves as you introduced yourselves, you need to have at least 7 members on a CBOC, and these members need to be drawn, or supposed to be drawn, pursuant to the education code from various constituencies. Business organizations, you can see, senior citizens organization, bona fide taxpayers organization, parents or guardians of students. So I heard many of you sort of identifying with these various constituencies that you're required to have on your board. Next slide, please.
John,
Yes.
how frequently do you see CBOCs with more than 7 members?
Not infrequently. I do note that it's oftentimes hard to pull together volunteers who are willing to serve on CBOC. So it's not infrequent that the goal is to have more than 7. Many districts are fortunate to get 7. So I'd say it ranges. I think aspirationally many districts are looking for more than 7, but it ranges. And again, a lot of it is constrained by getting volunteers to do it. So here we go. The composition of the CBOCs again, terms of 2 years. They're staggered so that you don't have everybody going off at the same time. no more than 3 consecutive terms. And my hat's off to anybody who would serve that long. It's actually I know a lot of work. And that the 2-year terms begin as of the date of appointment by the Board of Trustees. Next slide, please. So what is CBOC? What are they supposed to do? Your chair actually did a really good job as going through the bylaws that you have there. Your bylaws actually track really nicely Prop 39 in the Education Code. But at the end of the day, just like your chair said, the purpose of the CBOC is to inform the public concerning the expenditures of bond revenue. This is really about creating public confidence. And that's again, part of the trade-off for that lower voting threshold is to have this independent body of folks who are overseeing the work of the district with respect to the bond program. So active review and report on the proper expenditure of taxpayers' money. Advising the public as to whether the district is in compliance with the constitutional mandates with respect to the expenditure of the funds. So that's all a specific mandate. That's what the CBOC is required to do. Next slide. So I went through and I kind of tried to pull out some of the active verbs that are used in the Education Code provision that I just had up there. And it's about informing, reviewing, reporting, advising. It's that oversight function. And I want to distinguish that from kind of the role of the district, which is ultimately to approve, to authorize, to endorse, deny, reject. That's the district's role and sort of that. So one of the arts in this area is sort of ensuring robust oversight while respecting the lanes of sort of district and district staff. So I think this is always an important thing for us to kind of bear in mind is making sure that we respect the CBOC's role in ensuring robust oversight while, letting the district actually do the work itself. Next slide. So what requirements are we talking about specifically in terms of the Constitution? What does the Constitution say? Bonded indebtedness incurred by a school district. It's for the construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation, and replacement of school facilities. And this is really to distinguish it from maintenance, ordinary kind of ongoing operations. Got to use the money for these things, construction, reconstruction, etc. Next slide.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
In understanding exactly what falls into the difference between the construction and maintenance?
Yes.
Is there any specific guidance that the committee is compelled to use, or is it based on case law?
Well, it's a really good question. I think there are probably auditing standards that to a certain extent would apply. I mean, are we creating on some level, are we creating a capital asset, right? As opposed to, I'm looking for an example that might be useful. You got a roof, for example, that's supposed to last for 20 years. And then kind of 15 years into it, you've got to do some patching of that roof. I would submit to you that if you patch it and that roof isn't going to last for the remainder of its sort of useful life, that's not the kind of thing that you can charge, generally speaking, to construction, reconstruction. But if you had to tear the roof off and put a new one on, that would be, in my view, that would be sort of the, I don't know if that's responsive to your question.
And where does painting fall on the legal analysis?
Just plain painting, of an existing building.
Artistic as well. Yeah, artistic or painting of an existing building or versus painting of a new structure.
I think
What's
painting
the
of a new
legal guidance?
structure would be, I think that would be clearly chargeable to the new structure. I think that could be, but again, this kind of thing, I think ultimately, oftentimes accountants and auditors have things to say about all this. My first take would be if you got a new building, you're bringing online and you're painting it so that it's ready to go. That would be part and parcel of the bond project in my assessment. When you're painting an existing building, I don't know. I'd probably want to defer to somebody who thinks about that day in and day out, but that doesn't feel like it would be construction. That feels like maintenance. But I'd want to sort of reserve ultimate judgment on that. There probably might be additional facts that might bear on that. But generally, that's kind of the distinction I'd be drawing is repair, maintenance versus creating a new thing.
This can open up a lot of gray areas, right?
Yeah,
I think
absolutely.
one that's been highlighted by the public is that in order to build a school structure, classrooms needed to be moved into portables.
Right.
And the
Right.
portable needed a water dispenser.
Right.
And the water dispenser was charged to the bond.
Right.
But if you just look at the line item says, water,
Yeah.
Which we would all agree is not a capital expense. But is it appropriate because that classroom had to be moved to build a new one? Maybe yes.
Yeah.
So
Well, there's a certain, yeah,
I think
there's a certain
lot of
but for,
context,
there's
yeah.
a certain but for,
Yeah.
test that you might apply. And this, maybe we'll talk a little bit more about this towards the end of my time here. But, what kinds of things, because I know there's something that you'd expressed some concern about or interest in, is what kinds of district salary costs can be charged. And there's a certain but for, is this stuff that we, we wouldn't be incurring but for the existence of the bond program, so the water cooler would probably fit in that in those parameters. Next slide, please.
Bond language though, it actually lists repair, construct, or acquire.
Mhm.
So that's just particular to that bond, that language that we do it in that context.
Well, again, I think it would depend on the nature of the repair, right? Are we talking about a complete rehabilitation of, again, drawing a distinction between patching a hole in the wall versus, putting on a new roof, replacing the HVAC, doing major overhauls of things. So I think that it's a little bit difficult kind of on the fly to kind of speak to every aspect of those nuances. But I guess all it goes to is there could be some things that are of a scale that they actually would be appropriately charged to the bond, even if they could in some sense be characterized as repair. So I guess I'm saying that would be a longer conversation for sure.
But I just want to take you back to my question. A longer conversation with whom? Because what I heard was the board, the committee here, the
Right.
CBOC should be somewhat deferential to an auditor in determining whether it's a repair, but also that there's nuance and might need some guidance. So
Right.
where does a committee like this get that legal advice on what is constitutionally compliant?
I think you'd be working with district staff. You'd also, insofar as quite specific questions were sort of queued up, I do think that you'd probably want to perhaps make sure that you got reference to auditors and maybe counsel. But I don't know, how do you all deal with this kind of in the ordinary course when these kinds of questions come up? Do you have a sense of
Excuse me. Yeah, so a couple of different ways. One is the internal reviews for compliance with Prop 39. And then if we even question that, right, we'll go to legal counsel for determination of the appropriateness of using it for bond funds. Or using bond funds for that before it comes to the board for consideration.
And I do know that there are, of course, you all have reviewed them. That's part and parcel of your mandate. There's sort of an annual performance audit and an annual finance audit where I believe those kinds of things would be typically looked at. I think there would be sampling to ensure that the various things that end up, charged the bond program are appropriately being charged the bond program. So next slide, please. So again, these are additional kind of requirements that the Constitution sets forth with respect to bond programs, or with respect to bond programs. And you can see again, constitutionally, you are only to use the proceeds of the bonds for the specific purposes specified in Article 13A. You need to comply with a specific list of facilities projects that are articulated in the bond program. We were just referencing the fact that there's an obligation to conduct an annual independent performance audit and an annual independent financial audit. And also a requirement that the district provide responses to findings and recommendations in the financial or performance audit. So those are the, again, the requirements that come out of Prop 39. Next slide. I'm sorry. So yeah, on this slide here, then, what are the shalls? What are the things that the CBOC is required to do? And again, I think your chair pretty much touched on this. You're required to have committee proceedings that are open to the public and noticed. You're required to issue regular reports, and frankly, those reports have to be issued at least annually. And those reports are required to include a statement about whether the district is in compliance with the constitutional requirements, and a summary of your committee proceedings. And you're also required to keep minutes of your meetings. And those minutes need to be made available on the website that's maintained, by the governing board. Next slide. And again, just to summarize, CBOCs are supposed to inform the public, advise the public whether the proceeds are being properly used for the construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation, replacement of school facilities. And this is really just kind of summarizing what I've already sort of covered.
So John, the takeaway from that is if there is a concern from the CBOC, we advise the public and we cannot compel the district to do anything. Is that right?
The mechanism, well, let me take a step back from that. I mean, the mechanism for expressing, for example, a belief that that there have been improper expenditures would be the report that you all periodically issue. There are remedies actually in the education code if for taxpayers generally, as I would note. They're fairly draconian. It would require filing a lawsuit if you think that if anybody thinks that any district is expending bond funds unlawfully. There's again provisions in the education code that provide for priority litigation to stop that kind of misuse of funds. But that's available to anybody. That's not limited to the CBOC. The CBOC's role is, as you note, or the CBOC's remedy is to articulate concerns in the report that you all annually, at least annually, would be issuing.
A megaphone, not a hammer.
I think that's one way of looking at it.
Or handcuffs.
Next slide, please. Next slide. And again, I don't want to spend too much time on this because your chair already kind of talked through the various things that you may do. But I'd note that you have the authority to receive and review copies of the annual independent performance audit. We talked about that. Receiving and reviewing copies of the annual independent financial audit. Next slide. There we go. You may inspect school facilities and grounds. That would always be done in conjunction with district staff and in coordination with district staff so that you're not creating conflicts with respect to what's going on the site. Receiving and reviewing copies of deferred maintenance proposals and plans. Next slide. And again, as your chair noted, reviewing efforts by school districts to maximize bond revenues by implementing cost-saving measures as are listed there.
What does that last bullet mean? Recommendations regarding the use of cost-effective and efficient facility placement. What does that mean that we do?
Well, again, reviewing efforts by school districts or to maximize bond revenues by implementing cost-saving measures, including but not limited to recommendations regarding the use of cost-effective and efficient reusable facility plans. I would really be deferring. In the first instance, I'm not sure that these are plans that are necessarily put together by every district, but if they were, I would be deferring to sort of district staff with respect to what kinds of cost-effective and efficient reusable facility plans are at issue. I don't know if you've got any experience in particular with that.
I can talk to that, and Will or Martin if you want to jump in as well. Oftentimes when you're looking at major construction programs, there are, I'm not saying prefabricated, but pre-designed, pre-approved building plans that can be used so you don't go through all the costs of creating that again.
To differentiate from item C, which is about building facilities that can presumably be used for many different purposes. I think is that how to differentiate those two?
Well, would the joint use be more reference to things you might be doing with I don't know, another agency? Is that so? If the city, for example, and the district wanted to collaborate on the sharing of, I don't know, athletic fields or certain facilities that, again, the city and the school district might want to use jointly. So I think that's a way of reducing costs because you're sharing the cost with another agency.
Did that answer your question? I have a question about this. I feel like the language is a little confusing. Review efforts by the school to maximize bond revenues. through cost savings. Can you
Yeah.
explain what that's supposed to mean?
I think it really,
What do we have to do with revenue
I
here?
think it would be more elegantly and more,
Yourself.
more accurately read as, it's written the way it's written, but I think the way I would have written it is maximizing the use of bond revenues or maximizing the ability to use. It's sort of, how are ways that you can sort of stretch your dollars, I think is really what they're trying to say. The revenues are what
I
they
agree
are.
with you. It's like the word is missing there
Yeah.
because it's maximize bond revenues by,
Right.
and you might say, oh, okay, well, we're going to save money now so that when we issue the next bond in the future, we'll get a better deal and maximize our revenue. I don't think that's what the
I don't think that's
legislature
what they
was
meant. I
trying to
think
say.
How are you maximizing the effectiveness of your bond revenue?
Yeah.
I think is really what they're.
Okay, so we're all clear on that.
You might call it like the value engineering during the design process.
I think that's right. I think that's right. It's not the most elegant text, but that's only one of probably thousands of examples of.
And also beyond value engineering, it's using our bond proceeds in conjunction with other available funding too, to make it go further, right? So it could be like the E-rate program for technology, right? We were able to leverage that with our bond program to do more than we would have with just bond dollars alone. Facilities funding from different areas, different grants, working with PG&E on some of their cost savings measures that also brought money back into our bond program that extended the amount of dollars to the point where between all of those measures and interest earned on money sitting at the county treasury, we have exceeded our $198 million authorization for the work that we've been able to do with the bond program in Redwood City.
Prop 39. Funding is another big.
Do you have any examples, John? Let's just take A, for example. So review district plans to reduce the cost of professional fees. Have
Right.
you worked with any CBOCs who you've seen do this? How have they done it? What have they reviewed? Do you have any tangible examples there? Just picking on the first one.
Just thinking through, are there ways to, short answer is no. I don't think I've ever like specifically, been advised of CBOCs that have specifically focused on this, but even things like architectural fees or engineering fees, you may have some examples.
Well, it goes to reusable facility plans, right? That would reduce professional fees if we were able to use that. If we were building 14 gymnasiums, let's say, and we use the same cookie cutter approach for that, we would reduce fees along the way for professional services is one example.
So,
On a previous bond.
but is there a district plan to reduce the cost of professional fees? Because what it says here is the committee will review efforts by the district. So there'd have to be something written down to review, right? Of course, good district practice is to do all of these things, but are there actual plans written for any of these categories that you're aware of today? Rick?
I don't know if there's plans written, but I know it's a consideration when we're evaluating projects and moving forward. Right. So we might not have a plan that says every project that we're going to do is going to use the same building. But as we start allocating and approving projects, we're certainly looking for cost savings along the way. Where back to the example, if we were going to modernize 2 schools and we we're going to put a gym in, standalone gym, we would try and leverage one against the other to reduce costs.
So I guess just to put a finer point on my question, if we were asking at the next meeting to review the district's plans in these 5 categories, would it be new work that you would have to do to create that presentation, or would such plans already be articulated somewhere that you would just share with the committee? Okay.
Hey, just to try to take this out of hypothetical, I think in the last bond, there were many shade structures constructed for like outdoor lunch and eating areas. Was that ever discussed earlier in the bond, like before any of us were on this board, about cost savings measures? And if it was, I guess, how did that go, or like what actions were taken to discuss?
I would have to defer to Will or Martin on that. That was before my time as well.
So we tried to use what's called a DSAPC or.
Will, is your mic on down there? Just checking to make sure people will be able to hear you later if needed.
So we did use what's called a DSA pre-checked plan. So it's a DSA or DSA PC plan. So it's plan for a lunch shelter installation that's already been through DSA, been reviewed and approved to help expedite and minimize the architect's, design fee and design requirements to execute the project.
Yeah, that's a really great example. I've been involved in some projects where, things are purchased through, group purchase, organizations where you can get stuff that is essentially kind of off the shelf, right? And it's to your point, it's already been through DSA, which is time consuming and expensive if you have to go through rounds of comments, et cetera. So those are really good examples actually of sort of cost saving measures.
So to go back to Carl's point, the committee can only really review the planning and the efficiencies here if the board of trustees has requested that information be presented somewhere or accumulated somewhere so that then it could be shared with the committee as well and reviewed.
Yeah. I suppose I think that the notion of, these kinds of meetings where sort of interests and expectations are kind of shared is very helpful, because I think it could give give staff a real good sort of a sense of the kinds of things you'd like to hear about as these things move forward. So I think this is a super helpful conversation to be having. Next slide. So, and this is what we've talked about already. It's not the CBOC's role in particular to take part in the operating of a district bond program, but the oversight piece is the key. So, no direct, directing of staff or contractors. It's really insofar as there are oversight concerns, they really get routed, I think, appropriately to the chief business official, so that those sorts of lines can be honored. Next slide. And of course, the district has got an obligation without expending bond funds to provide support to this committee, including staff support, assistance with administrative tasks, providing information, etc. So, and again, the key is that it's got to be done without expending bond funds. Next slide. I don't think we need to worry about this. This isn't relevant to you all. Next slide. And Brown Act, actually, we got a really interesting question that maybe I'll just move to, and that's a question of whether or not the Brown Act actually applies to, CBOCs generally. It's sort of interesting. I took a deep dive into the education code just to refresh my recollection before coming over today. And the Ed Code does not say that CBOCs are subject to the Brown Act. It does say that meetings are open to the public and that they are noticed in the same way that the district governing boards meetings are noticed, which is driven by the Brown Act. But sort of interesting. I did I sort of used the ultimate research tool of Google to try to get a sense of kind of what other CBOCs do and sort of what the what the thinking is on all of this. And turns out that most every agency, frankly, that and sort of representational associations that sort of deal in this space, including the California Association of Bond Oversight Committees. They have a really good website, by the way, with lots of information. They're of the view, and I think they're right, that the Brown Act is essentially is deemed to govern CBOCs. It's not explicitly stated, but I think it's pretty strongly inferred, and that's certainly the practice that those who work in this area, including those that are very CBOC centric, are suggesting should apply. So I do believe the Brown Act applies to your meetings and to your proceedings. That being said, I'm sure you all have heard multiple presentations on the Brown Act, but I'll move through it very quickly. Meetings are supposed to be held in an open room, 72-hour notice on your agendas. They've got to go out 72 hours before the meeting. Opportunity for public comment, as you all did today. Didn't have any public commenters, but that's part of your agenda. Rather restrictive rules about sort of the proceedings or the conversations you all have outside of an open meeting. You can't essentially talk to a majority of your membership about something within your jurisdiction outside of an open meeting. So that's at a very high level, kind of what we're dealing with there. Next slide. Talked about this already. Next slide. All right. And I think that's it. Any other slides? Okay. And these just additional resources. I was just talking about the CalBOC. I think that, like I said, is a pretty good website to give you a sense of what other CBOCs and other people who think a lot about CBOC sort of responsibilities, what they say about you know, the various questions that you might have. I had a couple, maybe I can just move on to some of the questions that I have
Please.
here, if that's all right. And
Yep,
unless
Who's the district's general counsel?
I'm the district general counsel.
Okay,
Yes,
so the county council is the Redwood
That's
City
right.
School District's general
that's
counsel.
right. We provide counsel to the district by contract. We in fact contract with every school district in the county. The county is a separate agency, of course, but we do contract to provide general counsel legal support to the district. The district also has attorneys, I think, probably that they contract for other matters as well. But we do serve as a general counsel for the district. And let's see here. So one of the questions I had, I'm just going to go ahead and read it, is we're aware of an AG opinion on charging some district personnel to bond funds. However, the opinion is quite specific that the only activity that can be so expensed is, quote, administrative oversight work on construction projects, end quote. In the opinion, it's pretty clear this means project management to make sure bond funds are well spent and is activity that might otherwise be contracted out by the district at a higher price. The question then is, how broad is it, quote, administrative oversight? This certainly could include a bond project manager employed by the district. How about an accountant who spends some time tracking invoices? How about a maintenance worker who does some work on a new building? Clarity would be helpful. So there is in fact an AG opinion on this. There are AG opinions on lots of things. The Attorney General of California, when asked, unlike sort of the courts, when asked, will provide the AG's opinion on various questions that are posed to the AG. And at some point back in 2004, a question was posed to the AG. May a school district use Prop 39 bond fund proceeds to pay the salaries of district employees who perform administrative oversight work on construction projects authorized by voter-approved bond measures? The short answer is yes. And I think that the real issue when you look at what can be charged and not is it really comes to, I'm going to look for some key language here that I think might be helpful. So what we're looking at is work that district staff is doing. It's drawing to a distinction from administrator and teacher salaries for general school operations. You can't charge that to a bond. So that's really kind of the distinction. Are you doing things that are that you wouldn't have to do but for the bond project existing? So, sort of ordinary sort of custodial cleaning up, for example, that can't be charged to the bond project. On the other hand, costs that construction project costs, such as material and equipment, architecture and engineering design work, construction worker salaries, as well as project administration costs, work that school districts would not be required to undertake or fund, but for the existence of a construction project, those things can be charged to the bond. I don't know if that's a helpful delineation, but that's, I think, kind of the key language coming out of that decision, sort of that, or we didn't have the bond project, we wouldn't have to do this stuff. If it's stuff that we're doing because of the bond project, it's chargeable to the bond. I don't know if that helps in terms of a delineation, but that's roughly, I think that at the highest level, that's the best way I can think of to sort of crystallize a test.
Appreciate that. And I was the one who asked you that question. I asked a similar question to Nathan on the audit report, so he's probably got an opinion to share too. But when you look at the expenses for last fiscal year that are marked as employee salaries or employee district employees, about half of it is the bond project man, or I think it's called assistant superintendent of bond oversight or whatever. Then there's an accountant, and then there's a bunch of maintenance people who did things. And so the question is, are those chargeable? They're not project oversight, opening a gate so that a contractor can get in or watering a newly planted tree. But to your point, well, they wouldn't have to water that tree if the bond didn't pay for it, or open the gate if the contractor didn't need access. So this is where we're looking for some clarity.
Right. And and it's sort of the notion, of course, is that this would be temporally limited as well to the time that the construction is taking place. I mean, eventually people are just gonna have to water trees. At some point after the project is done. People are gonna have to open gates at some point after the project is done. But if you're opening the gate so that the construction equipment can get in there, you know, it really can be a fairly, you know, I hate to use the word again, but can be a fairly nuanced and fact-specific inquiry. I mean, how, you know, 5 years from now, it's not going to be appropriate probably to charge, you know, sort of a tree watering, notwithstanding those trees came out of a bond, were originally paid for out of a bond. But again, that's a little bit of speculation on my part. It's all fact driven. So that was a interesting question, and it gave me a chance to jump back into some AG opinions. Committee vacancies. Is there a requirement that the district fill open positions required under law? What would define a timely manner? What's the recourse if not done in a timely manner? Since selection appointment is done by the district and board, the committee itself has no way to ensure its own full staffing level. You know, that's true. The education code is, as I was mentioning earlier, is pretty specific about the makeup of the bond oversight committee. You're required to have at least 7 members, and some of them are supposed to be drawn from specific constituencies. Some of the constituencies that are sometimes difficult to get are members of taxpayer organizations, and you have that one covered.
That one we have.
Yeah, sometimes members of senior organizations, members of business organizations that are active in the district. I would suggest that the law contemplates that there'd be an ongoing reasonable effort to fill vacancies of those sort of mandated positions, or to get 7 members if for whatever reason you don't have 7 members. I don't think that what the law talks to, if you look at you know, what are the remedies when when a district doesn't have a full complement, or it doesn't have folks drawn from the various places it's supposed to have folks drawn from, you could actually, in theory, file a lawsuit and say, hey, the district hasn't, you know, filled up its CBOC. It doesn't have the required members, but it requires that in order to prevail in that kind of lawsuit, and frankly, in order to get past go on that kind of a lawsuit, you've got to show that the district has acted willfully, which is to say that the district has not even trying. It's really kind of, you know, turning up its nose, so to speak, at the requirement. So I would submit that if the district is making a reasonable effort, it's got, you know, it's posted for vacancies on its website, it's you know, it's working in a reasonable way to try to you know, address the vacancies, then, you know, that's in my view what the law requires. But again, it's going to be fact specific. What kind of things are happening?
John,
Yes,
in the lawsuit that is the remedy, the district is the defendant.
that's right.
And the plaintiff is in no way required to be the CBOC. It's
Just
any member of the
any
public.
taxpayer in the district, anybody who's subject to paying property taxes in the district.
So as part of that, never want to actually get into this in reality, but if the CBOC did desire to file suit against the district, we are a non-funded entity. Who would be the legal counsel representing the board?
Who would be the legal counsel representing the board? I don't know. We've never had that kind of a lawsuit filed, but the district would presumably secure some form of counsel. I don't know if the CBOC itself, you know, I don't want to get too far into it. Like you said, you know, my hope is we'd never find ourselves there. I don't know if the CBOC itself is an agency that would, you know, even have a personhood, so to speak, to file suit.
Or standing.
Or standing. Well, you're all taxpayers in the district.
Yeah, individually, you would have a right to bring it. That was kind of my question there. But as an organization, this organization wouldn't bring it.
Yeah, I think that's right. So
I think he was asking who would fund it.
Yeah.
The individual who brought it,
Right.
yeah,
right?
that's right. That's right.
You, Jit Paul.
And again, my hope would be that again, you know, we'd all agree that the district is, you know, doing a reasonable job to try to fill the vacancies. Again, it's and the other thing to look at is in the context. It's not terribly unusual to have vacancies. It's just many times challenging to get the people who actually check the blocks to serve. Let's see here. We talked about whether the CBOC is a legislative body subject to the Brown Act. I think it's probably an open question. My own sense, though, is the best reading is that it is subject to the Brown Act, as I've indicated. We talked actually some about another question that was oversight of plans versus review expenditures. And this related to the efforts by the school district to maximize bond revenues by implementing cost-saving measures. We actually had a
talked about
good
that.
conversation about that.
Yep.
And then finally, provide guidance on how to determine if a committee member fills one of these mandated roles: active in a business organization representing the business community located within the school district or the community college district, active in senior citizens organizations, or active in bona fide taxpayers organizations. Your bylaws state that with respect to senior citizens organizations and bona fide taxpayer organizations, it's I guess the bylaws indicate that it could be organizations that are at a regional, statewide, or national level. Whereas maybe another possible reading would be that, well, we'd really be more concerned about folks who do those kinds of things at the local level. It's interesting, the ed code itself, the education code itself, doesn't actually provide any guidance on that point. So I think that, a reading that allows for, involvement at a regional or a statewide or a national level is probably defensible. I would just offer, this is just me musing at this point, that all things being equal, if you had two applicants who were active in, let's say, senior citizens organizations, and one happened to be active in the Redwood City seniors, organization, and another happened to be, serving at the national and some national organization, you might prefer the local one. But I think either would be qualified to serve.
And by you mean the district, because they select the members.
Yeah, I think so. I was using you in a generic sense, but that's what I meant. So great. Are there other questions? I know that we kind of zipped through this, and it's certainly been interesting and fun to be here, but any
One of our upcoming agenda items, approval of the previous report. Right?
Mhm.
They're required to look at the people of the report.
Are you talking about your own report? Is that
Yeah. I think the challenge that we got hung up on last time is none of the members of that report are no longer on.
Oh, I see.
So it's the question. What are we improving, or what how should we qualify that if we do amend it in a way to take that to the public, so they know that it's been approved much later than probably
Well, I don't think that you necessarily have to have been serving on the committee at the time that the report was prepared in order to approve it. It's sometimes I think it might not be a bad thing to include some language that sort of explains, sort of the delay. If your sense is that an explanation is warranted, that certainly would be an appropriate thing to include. We needed some extra time to review, and owing to the fact that many of the authors of this report are no longer serving on the committee. It took us some time just to go through and confirm that we're comfortable with the findings and the findings and the conclusions set forth. So I think something like that would be appropriate, for sure. Yep. Well, great. Again, it's really great to see you all. I want to thank you all for having me and for your service here. I know it's really important stuff that is going on here. So if there aren't any further questions, I'll just go ahead and take my leave.
Thank you, John. Appreciate
Excellent.
it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, great session. We're moving on to 4.2 on the agenda now. Nathan Edelman is here from Eide Bailey, the auditor who did the financial and performance audits for last fiscal year. And everyone has received a copy of those. They were presented to the board, I think, last month, roughly. And will presumably make a substantial portion of our report on the previous fiscal year that we need to author and approve. So Nathan is here to talk briefly about the audits and answer any questions that anyone on the committee has about it. So thank you for coming.
Yeah, all right. Well, yeah, good evening, everybody. Thank you for my
name is Nathan Edelman with iDaily. Can you hear my pronoun?
Get the
There we
red
go.
light. There
Okay.
you go.
All right. Well, my name is Nathan Edelman with Ida Bailey, and I am the independent external auditor. So I actually do have slides, but I guess I never sent them in. So you'll just have to hear me talk for a little bit, but I'll just kind of go through. I first just want to define what is the scope of the audit. It's easy to say audit this, audit that. Auditors look at anything and everything, but excuse me. But first of all, just the scope of the audit, our responsibility as auditors versus the district's, management's responsibility. The district is responsible management. The folks that run the bond program, they are responsible for ensuring that, the bonds are used for their intended purpose, that internal controls are working as expected, and in fact, controls are actually established. So to the extent that there's a good audit or a bad audit, or non-compliance, or really for anything, it is management's responsibilities, as well as they get credit when there's good things to happen. Our responsibility as auditors is really to just ask questions and then report back in the form of our audit report. There's a few reports in the packet that we'll walk through, but again, it's just we are reporting back. It's just here's what we found as a result of the audit. That goes to the CBOC, that goes to the Board of Education. So you actually have there's two audits in the packet. One is a set of financial statements. That's almost as if the bond program, the Measure T bond program, is its own little entity. There's a balance sheet, there's an income statement. That is as of that June 30, 2022 fiscal year end. The actual numbers themselves may not be super relevant to you today, given we're now in like May of 2023, but it becomes the historical record of the results of operations for the year. And to the extent that there's no audit adjustments, then that does mean that the information that was previously presented to you folks is accurate. It's good information. But the scope of the audit of the financial statements is really to answer the question: do these financial statements comply with the governmental accounting rules? There's this GASB out there. If you're familiar with companies, you have FASB. There's the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, and it talks about how governments present financial statements. So our job there, make sure that those financial statements are complete and accurate, and that they comply with all of those governmental accounting rules. And then on the performance audit, and actually before we get to that, the results, the opinion, there's a one page, maybe actually 2 pages. There's a couple audit opinions within the financial report. Those have the firm letterhead, and then they kind of go on for a while, but it's what we call an unmodified or clean audit opinion. It really just says that those financial statements, they comply with those governmental accounting rules. So that's really the best opinion that you can have. There's another opinion kind of towards the back, in accordance with government auditing standards, which says that when you do an audit, you don't test the controls, but you ask questions, and to the extent that what's called internal control deficiencies, if those are identified, those are required to be reported out. Whereas, in a non-government audit, such as, of a random commercial company, you may have internal control deficiencies that are identified. Those may be discussed with management, and then that's the end of it. They don't go anywhere after that. With governments, those are required to be reported as audit findings, but there were none that are reported. So that's also a clean opinion. But just to be clear, the scope of testing of controls is not testing controls to identify deficiencies. It's if deficiencies are identified as a result of us doing the audit, those are required to be reported out. And there's an important distinction there. So then for the performance audit, which is probably what's a more relevant or more interest to this group, the scope of the performance audit, and on a high level, it's not the accounting records, but it's taking what went through the accounting records, what expenditures were charged to the bond program for the year, and then asking the question is, were these things, are these allowable for the bond program? So specifically, the scope of the performance audit is to ensure, one, that you have listed projects. Are the
projects that are charged to the bond program during the year, are those, are those listed projects the kind of towards the back of the, or within, I guess, the body of the Measure T ballot text? It has a lot of language about, construction, renovation, whatever. And then it also lists a number of school sites and has some specific projects within there. Question one is, are these listed projects? And then two, are these compatible with Proposition 39, which really is kind of similar, but are these construction projects? Are they things that would be allowable for the bond program? Actually, and then make sure I don't miss anything here. And then the other thing that we look at, which I know there's questions about this too, and there's salaries that are charged to the bond program. And the scope of the audit is not to look at any and all salaries, but it's to say, well, are these actually, that last speaker was probably way better at explaining this because it's a legal question more than an accounting question. But that Attorney General opinion, are the salaries that are charged to the bond program compatible, allowable with, I guess as per that Attorney General opinion. The scope of the performance audit is something that's set by the state. So the state of California publishes this audit guide every year for all school districts with a lot of things in it. There's an appendix for these Prop 39 construction bond audits, and certainly you can add anything and everything. Anything can be audited. Just pay for the cost of it, but you can never go below those requirements, which is really what I kind of just laid out, which is, are these compatible projects per Prop 39? Are they compatible with the specific Measure T in this case? And then are salaries compatible with that Attorney General opinion? And I'll talk more about that in a minute, but really the conclusion from all of that, you kind of towards the bottom of the performance report, kind of 3 bullet points. One, the expenditures that we sampled in the audit, and the audit works on a sample basis. You don't look at anything and everything. You cannot, it's not feasible to look at 100%, but you pick a sample. It's intended to be representative, and the sample that we looked at, there were no exceptions. And so the expenditures, therefore, expenditures charged to those bond programs were all allowable per Proposition 39. The salaries that ran through the bond program, at least the ones that we sampled, those are all consistent with the Attorney General opinion. And so there were no deviations, no audit findings as a result of applying those procedures. So kind of the one question, the question that was sent to me, talk more about salaries for a second. Specifically, I guess that Attorney General opinion covers, it says that school districts can charge salaries to the bond programs to the extent that they're performing administrative oversight. So like I said, the last speaker is an actual attorney, and it's really a legal question more than anything else. But the way that we would look at this in the audit, one, we're not going to question, we will take the Attorney General opinion to be correct, because that's what the district has said. Anything that's going to be charged to the bond program, it does need to run through a process. So it's not that one person can say, all right, this is going to be charged to the bond program and therefore it happens. There's a series of internal controls which have to happen, and approvals and decisions that have to happen, have to be made by the district before an expense can be charged to the bond program. So we're gonna take it that Attorney General opinion, and that's what the district is using, and all of the other school districts in California too. So there's obvious, kind of the way that that last speaker said, those salary expenditures would go away at the conclusion of the specific bond program. And to the extent that it's someone who's, say, doing accounting, or you're charging a portion of a CBO's salary to the bond program, well, clearly that work that is being allocated, that work would go away at the conclusion of the bond program. So to the extent that that's actually what we see in the accounting records, we would look at that and say, okay, that makes sense. Those would not be called out as audit findings. And then the Attorney General opinion talks about folks doing administrative oversight. So that is accounting, that is people who are, I guess we'll say, administrative, but it really doesn't talk about what's not within the scope of that are folks who are doing here. What did I write here? My notes. Actually, hard to find them as I talk, but it doesn't really talk about folks that are doing, electrical work or landscaping work, or, kind of what we'd say, not as construction. Obviously, the district doesn't employ construction contractors, but people that are doing, digging in the ground. And there are other sections of ed code and public contracting code that do talk about, for these very small projects, things that are under, I thought the threshold, I have it written down. Yeah, I think the threshold was $60,000 for these kind of tiny projects. And that would be someone, and these all have to be directly connected to, have a direct nexus to an ongoing bond project. And then the conclusion of the bond project, these things go away. The project is completed, turned over to the district. It begins use. So I think I heard an example of watering plants from the prior speaker. So if that was as a result of just closing out the bond project, let's say we use district maintenance staff, it's a one-time non-recurring. We would look at in the audit, look at timesheets, we'll look at whatever support was used by the district to charge them to the bond program, and make sure that we can really agree that, okay, this is a non-recurring one-time, it's the direct result of the bond project. Once the project is turned over, students are in the building, it's being used. Obviously, then, we would not expect to see that watering of plants or landscaping or, cleaning of buildings. We would not expect to see that. And to the extent that those remain in the bond program, then those would be called out as audit findings, because then you're crossing over from, non-recurring projects, non-recurring, setting up that capital asset versus running a school district. And those ongoing maintenance costs are all things that would go to the general fund or, wherever would be appropriate for those. So don't know if I help on that one or not, but that's kind of, that is kind of the executive summary of the results of the audit, the scope of the audit. So with that, I'll turn it over to the group, and to the extent that there's any questions, I can try and elaborate further. I'm happy to try.
Questions from anyone on the committee for Nathan? Thank you for the intro and overview.
I have two questions. One is, I appreciate the update that it's a clean report with respect to the internal controls. I know you're talking about like disclosable findings, material weaknesses, significant deficiencies. Did you provide any lower level of feedback on internal controls to the district during your work, like a PIO, program improvement opportunity, or non-conformance or anything like that? Or
Oh, no. So no. There's I don't know if it's in the packet, but there would be there's what's commonly called like a management letter. And that letter would describe things that are, for example, past audit adjustments, where it's, things that weren't big enough to create audit findings, but yet they're still discussed with management. Those would all be disclosed there. So there's not really any special conversations. So no.
okay. And then did you work on the audit for the 2020 to 2021 period?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's the same. I see the note about that it's a clean report. Is that how you would summarize that one as well?
Oh, yeah. So June 30, 2021.
The
The previous fiscal year. I
previous
think you're
fiscal
asking.
year.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. So I
To
don't
this one.
remember anything. I wasn't ready I haven't looked at that one for probably a year now. I don't remember anything about 2021. So usually if I remember something, it's not good. I think it's been I don't remember any issues with any findings with 2021.
I'll just go back to this employee salary thing. And I know it's a bit of a hot button issue because the language in the Constitution is so clear that you can't, spend bond money on administration and teacher salaries. So we just want to be crystal clear on that particular one. And we've had a discussion, a couple of viewpoints on that this evening, and thank you for yours. So my question is, you mentioned during your remarks that there's an approval process in place for things that are charged to the bond. And that you would, if in going through and doing your audit, if you were to review that internal control, you would share if there were any deficiencies. Did you in fact review the internal control on charging district personnel time to the bond fund as part of the audit?
Okay, yeah, so it's a good question because there's a distinction between the purpose of the audit and the scope explicitly to identify and then report on control deficiencies versus if deficiencies are identified during the audit, then those get reported. So an example of what would be reported as a control deficiency would be we look at the payroll expenditures and it turns out there are no approvals, or the employee themselves is the approval to charge their own salary to the bond program. Those would be the kind of things that would be reported out. But then to the extent that we don't identify deficiencies through just the process, it makes sense. And then also if we look at the expenditures and there's no exceptions with respect to the compliance, then there would not typically be a path to report a control deficiency. So it's a little different than an audit where the point of and the scope of the audit would be explicitly to test internal controls.
Got it. I think.
So
Yeah.
can I add to that? Carl,
Please,
though, which is-
yeah.
So, and you used a sample population where you attempted to get across all of the codes and then the material items as well.
Yeah.
So the number of samples you looked at that are relevant to payroll or small payroll, maybe a very small set of your sample set.
Yeah, actually, since let's see, I don't know if sometimes we have it in the report where it says how much payroll we looked at.
I don't see it.
Oh yeah, probably the reason why. So if I look at the financial statements for a second, the total, I don't know what page this is in your packet, but page 5 in the financial report is the income statement for measure T. And it shows, for example, we talk about materiality, kind of the audit is somewhat high level in that respect. It's not feasible to look at every transaction, but total expenditures were $53 million. And so I think that salaries are about 400,000. So it's kind of a small number in relation to
Yes.
the big thing. And then if we're talking about specific transactions, it might be, $5,000 or 10,000. Those are not the kind of things that would be subject or that would be. So we look at payroll, but those smaller transactions are typically not going to be part of the sample.
Sorry, and the immaterial samples that you pulled based on a risk analysis, you do not put that payroll category in there because of the risk?
No, okay, so here, better way to explain it. If there's $1 million construction invoices that are running through the bond program, those are all going to be looked at because you say, well, everything, these are million here, million there, these are all material. You look at those 100%. And then you have a sample of everything else. And so when there's a $5,000, $2,000, payroll transaction, those are all going to be shuffled up and then randomly selected. And so they're, every transaction has an equal likelihood of being selected. But when you're talking about there could be hundreds and hundreds of transactions, of which some of that is payroll. I don't know what percentage would have actually been touched as part of the audit.
Okay, I think what you just said disagrees with the report on methodology, page 18, where it says that the additional sample set of immaterial transactions was judgmentally selected based on a risk assessment, not arbitrarily selected at random where they all have an equal likelihood of being in there. So my question is, in that process, is a higher risk assignment given to those kind of, easier to violate areas like payroll? Or is it what you described where it's any additional immaterial transaction is just as likely to be looked at?
So if there were prior findings, knowledge of non-compliance, then yeah, we'd be able to say, yes, there's, you'd look to ensure that those prior findings were addressed. So in this case, there's no control deficiencies about payroll. There's no non-compliance that were identified previously. So payroll itself would be looked at as And it's a small item, it just in relation to that $50 million. Payroll transactions are going to be looked at just like any other transaction in the bond program.
So were there any categories that were judgmentally selected based on the risk assessment?
Categories that would have been judgmentally selected. I think the judgmentally selected is referring to those large transactions.
No, so if you look at page 18, it's the dual methodology, right? So you
Uh-huh.
pull all material transactions, and then for the immaterial transactions, it's saying that you didn't use a randomized sampling, that you used judgmentally selected based on a risk assessment. So I'm just trying to understand if this report is accurate that you used that, or if it was randomly selected immaterial transactions just reaching that 67% threshold.
Selected all expenditures that were individually significant expenditures.
Right.
So that would be those big items. Then individually significant expenditures were identified based on materiality. Judgmentally
it's
selected
too
expenditures.
deep. Too
Oh,
deep.
So was it randomized or was it judgmentally selected?
Judgmentally selected expenditures based on risks. Oh, okay. I think by judgmentally selected, you're putting those into buckets, and then within the buckets, there's going to be a level of randomness. So payroll, you can think of payroll as a bucket, I guess would be a way of saying it. So you have construction expenditures, and then you have another bucket for payroll, bucket for benefits. And so within the payroll bucket, there would be a level of random selection of payroll transactions.
But it sounds like only if it were judgmentally selected to be reviewed. Payroll
I don't
as a category. I think that's what you're
Well,
saying.
so by buckets,
know
do you mean
here-
object codes? Like I'm trying to follow
Also,
the
okay,
language of
Let
here.
me just
versus
make
your
it more clear.
presentation.
I know here explicitly for Redwood City, we did look at payroll. I'm 100% sure about that because I looked at it just before, just like to respond to the question.
Well, I think maybe
Yeah.
a way to kind of get more light on this is what was the risk assessment criteria? Like what prioritization or criteria method did you use to have that be judgmentally selected?
Yeah, the biggest risk criteria would be the size of the transaction. So large transactions are considered more risky than small transactions.
So the total of the 53 million spent last fiscal year, district personnel payroll comes in at about number, I don't know, 18 or 16 on the list. When you total it all up, payroll as a total. Sure, there's lots of big things ahead of that. But it's in the top 20, the 400,000 spent on payroll. So I think we're just trying to all better understand, okay, so it's in the top 20. Presumably you looked at it. You just said that you did look at it. So how did you look at it? And how did you sample it?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That may not be your question. That's
It's
my
okay, go
question.
ahead.
Okay, so payroll would have separate accounting records for payroll, and then from there you pick transactions that run through the payroll accounting records. And really the question is, give me not invoices, but give me the payroll records. Usually there are, for the people that have non-recurring costs, there's going to be timesheets that say this is exactly what they did, and there should be evidence of approval on the timesheets, in addition to the fact that they support the actual compliance. And those are the things that we would look at for the payroll transactions.
So there were, in fact, 395 transactions under payroll or district personnel cost.
Yeah,
so
could be.
And a couple of them are big because it pays for a whole person, the bond, the assistant superintendent of bond oversight or whatever that position is called. But some of them are $112 water to tree, right? So
yeah, and so for those large transactions, if we know who this person is because it's very obvious, such as
it's Don Diaz, right? I mean,
then we probably wouldn't continue to. There's not a whole lot to do. The salary number makes sense because it's ties out to salary schedules. We know what they do, and then the remaining payroll after that is probably a very large volume of tiny transactions, and that's the kind of the randomness of picking them.
Do you know what percent of that population you sampled?
Oh, sorry, say it again.
Do you know what percent of that population you sampled?
Of the total payroll? No, that I don't know.
Cameron, did you get your questions answered? Because
I did
I
not.
kind of jumped in
No,
with a
no, it's
specific
fine. I'm
example,
still
but
trying to understand if the methodology description reflected on page 18 is accurate because it does not align to what you described. And so I just want to know which it is, like whether the methodology was based solely on materiality and size, and then randomized for immaterial transactions, or if it was based on a judgmental assessment, risk assessment to select the immaterial transactions. And I think you may, somewhere in there, you may have said you picked the object codes based on the risk assessment and then randomized within those, but I'm not sure if I heard that right.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe I'm not explaining it too well. I just think of it as you have a bucket for construction, bucket for payroll. There's also benefits as well. And then so within there, there's judgment in terms of you pick these large items, but there's also going to be just a randomness in picking the samples because you can't really look at them all.
it's kind of an unsatisfying answer, I have to say.
That's a different methodology. A randomized sampling is just an utterly different auditing methodology than using
that's part of the
judgmentally
reason
selected
why
expenditures. So I just want to know which methodology was followed. That's it.
So I guess where it says judgmentally selected, is that from your perspective as a reader, does that mean we look at the whole thing and we pick this one, and we pick that one, we pick just based on a description, like a manual process?
Size, timing, code, name, repetition,
Oh, okay. So
judgmentally.
all right, maybe I'm leaving things out. I mean, probably judgmentally maybe isn't the best word to use. When I say random, there's actually there's a software that we use that I don't want to, it's not as sophisticated as like artificial intelligence, but it does pull things out based on, you know, I don't know, certain number patterns and dates that things happen. And so yeah, maybe there's maybe a little more that goes into it besides just 100% randomness, but
Okay, so selected by proprietary software.
yeah, it's not really I mean, it's like Excel add-ons that are used in the audit world, but yeah.
I wonder, and if you want to follow up after, you don't have to answer everything tonight. If there's some open issue that you feel would be best researched and responded back to the committee, we're happy to take it, after the fact. I'm just, I'm harping on this one on employee or district personnel for the reason that I stated. There were 400 transactions. Half of that is one transaction or two, the accountant and the bond oversight person. That makes it the bulk of, or 50% of it. The remaining 50% is 350 individual small little transactions of people charging maintenance personnel. It looks like charging, opening a gate, watering a tree. And so I'm just trying to understand like how many of those were looked at, if any, to ensure that A, it was an appropriate bond expense, and B, the internal controls on that person charging that time to the bond were appropriate.
Yeah, certainly due to the size of those transactions, those would not be explicitly, we must look at these. We may have, and I can look it up, and maybe that's a response I can give you later on.
Okay, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, maybe send me the questions. I can get you a more complete answer.
I have a quick question, just really quickly.
Yeah.
How do you determine, I mean, who determines possibly, let's say, for example, on a construction project, a road is paved, who would determine who would be the painting the lines for the road? Would it go under construction, or what if the union maintenance workers said, that's my job? Who makes the decision? Would that be chief business?
Excuse me, that typically be part of the construction contract, right? The striping of the roadway would be part that we would incorporate into the contract before we started the project, and it would be closed out when that was completed.
Thank you.
Would you like a follow-up on your question, Cameron, from Nathan?
No, proprietary software is what they mean by judgmentally selected. So I get that now, but it's not randomized. That's which was what was in the
or humanly selected. I think, is that what you're saying, Nathan? The software that you use highlights certain transactions to go look at. Just want to be clear on what we think we heard.
Yeah, so it highlights
This is below the
transactions
material
and-
line we're talking about now.
Yeah, so there's things that are pulled out, and then there's also a sense of randomness that just shuffles it up and says, well, here's what we're gonna pick, because
So what would usually the software is used just to determine population size in that. So you dump your Excel in, and if you have 112 lines, it calculates how many of that population to meet your same threshold. And then it arbitrarily spits out the ones. So the only judgmental selection going on there is making sure you meet your adequate sample size relative to your population is basically what he's saying. Right, so that's
yeah,
different than wholly randomized.
yeah,
So there is
maybe
a
judgmental
sample.
is not the best word to, because I don't, it's not a word that's really defined well. So maybe it's a.
Are you suggesting that he should revise the report?
It's standard language for methodology
Yeah,
for
we
audits. But it's just not the,
We
it's
wouldn't be
not
able,
the process.
we
being
wouldn't be able
followed.
to revise report. Maybe it's something to consider for
Yeah.
future
Yeah,
reports.
Sorry, I didn't mean to choke you, Rick.
but I'm good. I have the factual
Okay.
answer to my question.
Any other questions for Nathan on the audits? Thank you, Nathan. Appreciate you sticking with us and going through this. Really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much. Have a good evening.
Okay, that finishes item 4, our guest presentations. Would anyone feel like we need a 5-minute break before continuing with the agenda, or should we just push ahead? Push ahead. Okay, push ahead. So we're moving into item 5 now, which is our action items. These are the items where we will be voting on so if a motion is put forward. So the first one is 5.1, which is the minutes from our February meeting. And those were provided in advance, and there's a copy here as well. First off, do we have a motion to approve last meeting's minutes?
Motion over. Second.
And a second. Okay. Any discussion on the minutes from the last meeting?
So I would note that 4.9 in the draft, in the reflection of the public comments from Mr. Robel, he did not disagree with the minutes. He disagreed with the substance of Ms. Mueller's statements. And I clarified that in the meeting, so it's inaccurately described here.
So how should we adjust that part of the minutes to be factually correct?
I think we should say that he stated that he disagreed with what Ms. Mueller had said in that portion of the prior meeting, but confirmed he did not disagree with the minutes reflecting what she had said.
So if we just strike, if it just said, and we're on, this is the end of 4.9, right? Right above 4.10.
Yeah.
If we said, let's see where Mr. Robel, anyway, let's see. He stated that, and he disagreed, and we strike the with the minutes and leave the basically with Ms. Mueller.
Ms. Mueller's statement in the prior meeting
That
the authorized propositions may include.
okay.
Right.
So there's a and maybe you could just type this up, or we could just send it to Olivia to adjust the minutes. But so there's a proposed change to address what Mr. Robel said. And I also reviewed the video recording, and you're indeed correct that that's what he said. So this is misrepresenting what he said. So if we correct that, is there any discussion on making that correction? Okay. Any other discussion on the minutes? All right. So with that change to 4.9, which we'll provide to Olivia to adjust, let's vote on approval of last meeting's minutes. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, so minutes approved as amended. Okay, we move into 5.2 now. At the last meeting, we discussed some proposed changes to the bylaws. We had some response from the district on those. There were some actions that Cameron took to harmonize those and come up with a final draft for approval this evening. So before we go into discussing the bylaws, do we have a motion to approve the amended bylaws? In a second?
Seconded.
Second, okay. Okay, so now discussion on the bylaws. They were distributed. We have a marked up copy here in front of us. So you can see the red line changes. Cameron, is there anything you led this initiative? Thank you for doing that. First of all, recognizing the work that you did here. Is there anything that you want to share with the committee about what's in the draft in front of us?
Yeah, so I think at a high level, what I attempted to do was clean up inconsistent drafting and things like that were in here. Remove statements in our committee bylaws that weren't actually actionable by the committee, but were actionable by the district. So there was greater clarity for anyone reading these bylaws in terms of what we do and what we don't do. And then also remove constraints that weren't legally required that were being put on the committee by its bylaws that might limit this committee or a future committee in terms of what they do, such as a really cumbersome quorum requirement, a very detailed and unnecessary procedural process for removing committee members if they aren't showing up or are, not abiding by the bylaws, things like that. So I looked for opportunities where we were unnecessarily encumbered as a committee or a future committee would be, and tried to remove those and bring it back to alignment with what's legally required. Also took out a lot of specificity. It was like, we'll meet in these months, or this will happen in this first meeting, as opposed to it just will happen as it's supposed to. And then the last thing is the minutes and the documentation. The district is responsible for noticing our meetings, so I tried to make that clear, and the district is responsible for posting certain documents for us, and I tried to make that clear and make it not so aggressively overprescribed. Those are the goals, but if anybody has any questions.
Are you striking out page numbers?
No, they're on here.
Some of this is just
Oh.
formatting changes
Sorry.
between the old bylaws and the new one. And when I ran it through the red line thing, it just highlighted formatting changes. So I'm sure we'll have the.
Did you make any changes for the Brown Act?
I did. So what I did was took an agnostic position as to whether the Brown Act applies or not, because I don't think our bylaws should bind us to a legal position on that. And instead, I said that our meetings shall be open to the public and shall be properly noticed by the district, which are the elements of the Brown Act that certainly do apply to these meetings. But I removed the previous position in the bylaws that the Brown Act applies, but did not insert a statement that it doesn't.
Okay.
So it's in line with
It's
the
agnostic.
ed code statement that just says they need to be, yeah.
I just focused on what we're required to do, not those positions, legal positions.
Yeah, I just want to thank you, Cameron, for doing the heavy lifting on this. Thank you.
And then you ran this by Rick at the district and got feedback, which you incorporated, or any commentary on the district's, or Rick, any commentary on the district's position on the bylaws?
No, we did go through it, we reviewed it and traded several emails.
I would just say in the drafts, I noted that the district would clearly like us to have a statement that the chair will remain on until replaced. And based on the conversation of the committee at the last meeting, when that was in the draft, I continued to remove it through the process. The proper succession from one chair to the next belongs in the Board of Trustees doing timely appointments so that seats can be filled. It does not belong to the committee members to stay on for an undefined amount of time beyond their committed term of service, is my personal opinion.
We agree with you, Cameron, and I think the intent, and I don't think it came across, it wasn't that a member, let's say Carl decided to leave tonight, we can't force him to stay until the next meeting or the meeting after that as president. It was in the realm of if Carl vacates the seat as president, but is still on the committee, or his term as president expires without reelection. It was to enforce reelection with current members. It wasn't to fulfill not to keep somebody on. We would have no luck in that.
And thank you for referring to me as president. I do appreciate that. I'm not sure that's a term of endearment anymore, but.
I'm used to the board meetings.
Any other questions, comments on the bylaws changes? We're ready to vote. Any public comment? Okay. So we have a motion to approve the amended bylaws, and all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, new bylaws are approved, and we appreciate the district's support in cleaning up the draft and posting these as the new bylaws effective as of what is today, April 11th, 2023. May, what did I say, April? President? We're in May. Thanks, Cameron, again. Okay, we are moving on to our 5.3, which is a topic we took up at the last meeting. And this is approval of the annual report by the CBOC for the fiscal year previous to the one we were just talking about with the audit, the 2021 report. And if anybody recalls, I could look at the minutes where we left it from the last meeting. We didn't approve them at the last meeting. We were waiting for some council's input, which we received some of this evening. And then we're going to put it on the agenda to reevaluate what we're going to do tonight. So moving into this first, is there a motion to approve the report for fiscal 2021?
Can I ask a question?
Of course.
So normally this body would be the one that is preparing the report. And is the reason that we are approving it tonight because we are not the same folks, the same members of the committee that actually prepared it? Because normally if we're approving it, I mean, if we're preparing it, it then will go to the board, or is that just the practice of this committee in the district?
Well, let me first comment on I think the timeline, and then Cameron, maybe you want to talk a little bit about the procedural aspect. So my recollection is that the report was prepared by the previous committee chair with the previous committee that some of us were a member of, but not during this fiscal year.
Right.
But the report was, and it was late because of COVID. The audit took much longer. So the report was actually ready, I'm guessing, in kind of June of last year, but that committee, that chairperson and the members of the committee who were around in that fiscal year had termed out, and there was no meeting that happened that June to vote on it before those people termed out. And so then it arrived on our agenda, I think was at the December meeting.
The original October meeting.
Yeah. So that was the timing behind why nobody here on the committee today was on the committee during that fiscal year, and why the chairperson who wrote the report didn't ever vote on it, because the meeting that would have happened where the chair was still in the chair didn't happen.
So is it the practice of this district and this committee that once you prepare the report, you then approve the report that you just prepared?
So I can help there. So our bylaws, including the updated version, say that the committee shall issue the report, and that the report shall be approved by an affirmative vote of 2/3 of this committee. So it's one of the most significant actions we take, and one of the only ones that requires that substantial burden. So yes, we do a report and then we approve it before it gets issued according to our bylaws. On the prior conversation where we stalled out on this one, our previous bylaws had an unnecessary requirement that we approve it as to substance, whatever that means. And that's where we stalled out, because we were theoretically standing behind the substance of the prior report, not just approving it procedurally like we would minutes of a meeting we didn't attend, but we trust the process to do it. Our current bylaws, you'll be pleased to know, no longer say
Now in
that we're
effect.
approving as to substance. They simply say we're approving it. So then that brings me to my third point, which is the discussion with the council earlier, who said we could add a note that we didn't, weren't privy to the ability to question the auditors or the different things like that. My perspective is the way that the report is written, it shows who the committee members are who prepared it, and the letter is drafted from the chair at that time. If it goes out as that, I think we're simply offering a procedural vote as this committee to allow our prior committee's work to go out. Whereas if there was some reason we needed to put our committee's names as the membership or write the letter ourselves as to the substance, we may want to have that kind of addendum. But at this point, under our bylaws, we're just approving for
Is that
issuance.
item 6 in the bylaws?
Yeah, 6B.
Okay, just to refresh ourselves.
6B. So that's kind of the
6B.
the 3 points of discussion.
Because of that misalignment, though, you're right. That, between, members listed and the letter by is no longer.
I think that could certainly be reflected in the minutes. It
Yeah.
could be addended to the report. It could be accompany the report where it's posted. I think there's a lot of ways to handle that. I do think my perspective is that the letter is to the public from the committee at the time. And we're all members of the public. So we are both approvers and recipients of this report, and it should probably stay that way. But yeah, I don't think it hurts to either have the minutes of this meeting where it's approved very clearly reflect that, it's an entirely new committee that's approving in a procedural way and not as to substance.
Yeah, I agree with that. As long as it's somewhere written where it's easily found, where.
Yeah.
You can.
So here's my suggestion, and I'm not the parliamentarian, but that we get a motion to approve the report as is. Then someone can propose an alternative motion to say, well, we should approve it with this language on top of it. And you can vote no on the first one and yes on the second one, or vice versa. Parliamentarian, do you want to correct me? Because the agenda says we're voting on the report, and the report was noticed and provided to the public. If we want to amend it, let's have a motion to do that.
I would say that we are approving the release of this report that was compiled by the committee at the time. I'm okay releasing it as is. It's just a little tardy, but why not? There's nothing that would change in the substance here. Not to use the hot word from the previous bylaws, but it is ready to go.
Okay, why don't you formulate that as a motion then, Carl?
Okay. I move to approve the annual report for 2020 to 2021 as is.
I second it.
Okay, any further discussion on the motion? I would just comment that I think what you said is you were moving to release the report. Did you want that word release in the motion? Just to clarify.
I think that's just how it's written in the bylaws now. So I think, we're not
It's
approving as to substance anymore.
Right.
So we're approving.
Issuing the report.
We're issuing.
Okay, so could you restate your motion just so we're really clear on the record
okay.
what we're voting on?
I move to issue the report.
Okay, so
Oh,
now
yeah,
parliamentarian.
please come in. Yeah.
I'm just gonna say, we are required to approve it by affirmative vote, but we are not approving it as to substance. And so, I think we should all take a hard look at how the minutes of this discussion, my recommendation would be, are reflected when we approve those at the next meeting. Make sure that they show that, with discussion ensued that we are not any of the committee that was present at the time the report was prepared, right, and are approving it for issuance in due process. But I think we do need that word approved, because that's our duty to approve it and then once we approve it, it's issued.
So his motion could be to
To
approve
approve
the
it for
release
issuance.
for issuance or approve for
yeah.
posting
Well,
or
yeah.
release or whatever.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
One more time, Carl.
I move to approve this annual report for issuance.
I second.
And, okay, thanks, man.
Approved and seconded. Any other discussion before we vote? All right, all in favor of the motion, aye, please, aye. Okay, any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, we needed 2/3. We got everybody, so the motion passes. Thank you, Carl and Cameron. Okay, so that finishes up 5, and we're moving into 6 now. So information discussion items. Note here that we always welcome public comment on any of these as we go through it as a committee. Okay, so 6, review Measure T bond activity since the last meeting. And then we have 6, 1, 2, 3, and 4. So just to summarize, these were reports that were sent out with the agenda, bond expenditures, contractor change orders approved by the district since the last meeting, no bid contracts executed since the last meeting, and new projects approved by the board, which may or may not have been spent, just to clarify 614. So we have these. Let's start with the bond expenditures since the last meeting. That was a spreadsheet that was provided, and it totals up to, well, I'm sorry, just to clarify, which attachment was that? 611, was that a spreadsheet?
Yep.
Okay. Got it, 611, okay. Does anyone have any questions for the district on this particular list of the, and just to clarify, Rick, what period are we covering here?
11/1 through 3/31.
Okay, and then the next version of this would cover April 1st through, okay, perfect. Through June 30th, and we meet again in August, I think. So we'll always be a little bit behind because it's on the quarterly schedule. Okay. So with that in mind, there are what, 400 roughly bond transactions in the last period, with a largest of nearly $500,000 down to the smallest being $7.50. So any discussion or questions on this list of expenditures?
I would just like to say that I appreciate on this report that it gives quite a bit of detail due to the description and so forth. But I do like to periodically see the financials that come directly out of our financial system and not on the spreadsheet.
Okay, good point. So normally, well, I don't know about normally, in the past meetings that I've been at, we have had a presentation on the summarized financial reports and the verifying that they agree, that the books agree. And so what I think your point is well taken, and maybe what we could do is include that at the next meeting to cover the period that we missed this time. Or we could decide when we get to agenda topics for the next meeting, what is the cadence of these different reports that we're now asking the district to provide? And do we want all of them for every meeting? Or do we want some of them just annually, or some of them, you know, every second meeting? But good point, Carolyn. Thank you for sharing. Any other discussion or questions on the expenditure list?
Personally, it would be more helpful for me to see if, like, I see it's by date, which is a very large receipt list. But to have it structured in order of cost classification code, and then summarized in each bucket for each, and you can even title it with, these are the dates. But seeing them all like this is a lot.
So in the Excel spreadsheet that we got, you can sort it, of course, any way you want. But are you suggesting then, just to clarify, that there's some extra columns that you would like in the next version of the report?
No, I mean,
Or,
each item would have its own, I don't know how it's done internally, it would have a category to the cost code.
Yeah, I imagine there's a work breakdown structure to the program that you would start basically sorting by project and then sort by the expenditures within that project.
Exactly.
is this something easily provided, Rick? Okay. Are people finding this report? Because we haven't had this before, and at least in my tenure in the committee, we've looked at the financials at the roll-up level, which is still important to do, to Carolyn's point, but we haven't had the detail provided. And so this is the first time that we've asked the district to give it to us. And I want to make sure that the committee finds it useful to look at if we're going to continue to ask the district to provide it.
She made a comment. She would like to see it by school.
You can,
It's essentially a pivot table. where you
Right.
Have it by project and.
so if you are able to look at it on the computer, you can sort it by project anyway. Does that apply? Is that the same as school site roughly? I mean, some sites are not. There's a site, well, there's a project called Energy and Security Projects, which presumably is across many different sites.
Like program administration.
But the one before that is Clifford Modernization, and the next one is Garfield Primary. So for all intents and purposes, the school site is included in the report if you sort by that first column. I think the printed version that we got, and I will make a request, and if we can do this maybe in the agenda items, or maybe we can just agree to, do we need all this printed material at the meetings, or can people work off the digital copies that are sent out? But anyway, I think the printed version that we have in front of us is by date, maybe.
Yeah.
Just by invoice date, which isn't particularly helpful. But if you've looked at the Excel version, you can sort it by school site, or by dollar value if you want to look at the biggest transactions, or by vendor if you want to look at who's getting the most money, for example.
I think it's helpful to have it printed for the meeting. If there are any comments about it, then you have something to look at. But we can review it on our own time and pivot table, as long as the column category is there.
Okay, and just to be crystal clear, is there a column, or what is the description of the column that you'd like to see added that isn't in here right now?
It's like it's a category code, and it depends on who's running the software. Yeah.
Okay. Cool. Any other discussion on 611? Okay, thank you for providing that, Rick and team. We appreciate it. And for taking the action item to add that additional column for the next review. Okay, that takes us to 612, which is contractor change orders approved by the district since the last meeting. You'll see here contractor change orders 612 and no bid contracts 613. And of course, all of the expenditures 611, and then the new projects 614. So these are all new requests. I added them to the agenda. I asked the district to provide the information to you. I was hoping it would be helpful, but as we go through each of these, let's decide whether we want to keep looking at these. So, okay, 612 contractor change orders. For those of you in construction, I'm sure you all know that change orders can be a place where a lot of activity happens after the original contract is written. So we have a list. I would request to the district that these be provided in Excel format going forward rather than PDF, so that they can be easily sorted by the committee members, totaled up, pivoted, whatever. So Rick, if you don't mind taking that action item. Does anyone have any questions for the district or discussion topics around the change orders that that are covered in this report?
Well, I really like this report. I think it's really interesting, and it's I don't know, I appreciated the fact that this was prepared for us to look at. It would be helpful, or I'd like to make the suggestion, I'm assuming approved is, it was board approved, that's what they call them. If we could see what the percent of project costs, the change orders or the current change order total is at. So that we could look and see, well, the Taft project came in, there's several change orders here, but it's under, 10% or something like that. Just another column with the current percent of project costs that the change order represents.
Is that easy for the district to do? Okay. So just picking on one here, the vendor is Atlas, it's Garfield, there's construction change order. It's $37,000. Approval is pending, I guess, from the board. It just came in. You're saying, is that 100% of the contract value? Is it 2% of it? Is that what you're saying, Carolyn? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just saying, so there's change orders like on this Garfield one with Rodan, there's 88 change orders for totaling, well, I'm assuming it's just 76 through 88, that totals to 72,000. It's not all the change orders, right? Yeah. And then, have we maxed out our change orders, or is there still capacity, or?
So within each site, you're wanting the percentage per contract or the percentage for the overall project? Because, for example,
Of the contract.
we have 10 contractors working on the project.
Mhm.
We could either present the percentage, the change order percentage per contract, or the change order percentage across the entire project. And
Yeah, for the whole project, it's
okay, cool.
I actually have a counter view of that, but go ahead with your.
Well, I was just, there is, in particular, but almost half of the change orders in contract that most of the in Garfield is there any takeaway that you can share with us on that? And is this has exceeded contingency and the budget in general?
Just to be specific, because I have it in front of me, of the 700,000 in change orders, 300,000 is for Rodan builders. So that does stick out as, yeah.
Great question. So, at Garfield, Rodan Builders is the general contractor. So, and their contract was much larger in dollar amount than all of the other trades. So the other trades have smaller contracts, and are, providing less scope. So Rodan's dollar amount would be expected to be larger. And, because they're the general contractor covering, the majority of the main new construction building, we would expect them to have more change orders than someone that was just handling plumbing or landscaping. And I believe Rodan is still well under the 10% change order. If I remember correctly. There was, okay, so Rodan has surpassed the 10% change order contingency that was initially set up. We sent when that happens, legally you need to send a futility resolution to the board, letting them know and acknowledging that contract went over the 10% in order for the county to be able to process that change order, and that did happen.
Yeah, and that's why I just think that would be helpful, because especially like change orders 1 through 75. Being a new member, I don't have knowledge of that. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is Rodan self-perform a lot of work? Is that why so much of it is attributed directly to them as opposed to some contract?
Just want to make sure your mics are on when you're talking so that we,
So
I'm
that's
a
a
little
great
late to the game
question.
on.
That's a
that
great
discussion.
question. So the Garfield New Construction Modernization Project, the project delivery method was multi-prime. So the plan set is dissected into a general contractor trade and then all of the other trades, and those are individually bid out. So Rodan was the general contractor. They self-performed some work and had a large group of subcontractors under them as well. Some of the other trades contractors also have their own subs. So in terms of the number of companies that are out there, it's more than just the 10 that are under contract. Each of those that are under contract have, not every one of them, but a lot of them have subcontractors under them as well.
And just to clarify, because I'm not a construction expert, the change order though is for the master contract holder? Or if one of
That's
their
correct.
subs has a change order, the general in this case is submitting it to you? to
That's
the district.
correct. Yeah, the contract holder
Yeah, okay.
is the change order is applied to the contract holder, even if one of their subs, even if one of their subs performs the work for that change order, the change order goes to the board under that general contractor Rodan, for instance, so.
And we're not categorizing the subs in this use case, right? We're just using
Correct, yeah.
Rodan's only one that we're seeing as the expense.
That's correct. Yeah. So Rodan and all of their subs are categorized on these sheets as Rodan.
Okay.
Yep.
So just to clarify the percentage request that you made, Carolyn, which I think is spectacularly appropriate here. I think what I would be looking for is the percentage of the change order relative to that vendor's contract, not to the overall Garfield project, right? Because for that vendor, it might be 15%, which is above your 10% limit.
That's correct.
But for the whole project, it might be 0.5%.
Yeah, so generally when we're looking at, the performance of an overall project, we look at the percentage, the change order percentage of the entire project. But Carl, to what you're saying, we also look at the individual contract, because if the individual contract surpasses the 10%, we have to send the futility resolution to the district. So it's totally up to you guys
So
whether
I think
you
we're
want
asking,
one or
I'm
both.
asking for one and you're asking for a different
Well,
one. So
I
We can
think
provide
because-
both.
Yeah, because Will clarified that it's multi-prime, so that changes things
Yeah,
from my perspective of things.
on a multi-prime,
Yeah.
on a multi-prime project, you look at the performance of the project as the overall project change order contingency. But when sending a change order to the board for an individual contractor, you're tracking whether they surpass their 10%, because if they do surpass the 10%, you have to send that change order to the board with a futility resolution in order for the county to process it.
and have any of those that have gone above 10% and gone to the board been rejected?
No,
They've all been approved.
the futility resolution?
Yeah.
Yes. The
And
futility,
roughly how many of those? I mean, is it 2 over the course of the life of the bond, or is it 200?
It's been few. Annabelle, probably a handful or so. Yeah.
5 or 6 in 7 years or something.
Yeah, out of, hundreds of contractors. Yeah.
Okay.
And yeah, there's verbiage that comes along with the futility resolution. Basically, basically it's in the district's best interest to approve the futility resolution, because to bring in another contractor to try to do that small piece of additional work that takes them over 10%, create coordination issues, mobilization and all that, it becomes more expensive to, if they wanted to try to bring someone else in to handle that, basically. So that's the verbiage that's included in the futility resolution.
Are we here aware of any of these futility resolutions that happened during the time period that we need to write our report on next, which is the 21-22 fiscal year?
I believe there would have been a futility resolution that went to the board during the 21 to 22 fiscal year. At least one, right? Okay.
If you don't mind, Rick, if someone could just share that with the committee, then, it might be something to note in the report. It might not be, but then we would have the information. So the request would be any futility resolutions or change orders that went above 10% that happened during the fiscal year 21-22 that we need to write our report on.
Absolutely. Good question.
Sorry. Did any?
No, please.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm done.
So they're noted as PCOs, potential change orders, and just a process question. Are these values set as PCOs, or will the change order reflect the same dollar value as the PCO?
So they start as potential change orders, PCOs, and are then negotiated. Some are refused by our team. And once the PCOs are approved, they're then compiled into a change order that gets approved by the board.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, so
Okay.
this report, we will be seeing all of these PCOs into a change order log.
Each of these line items.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, each of these line items, an individual line item on here is a change order. And then it notes the
Oh, yeah.
PCOs that were included on that change order.
Okay,
So these
so-
are all the PCOs that were either negotiated or approved. And then
Okay.
compiled onto a change order for that specific site and contract that goes to the board for approval.
Yeah, so I think this report should have the change order number on it. So, you know, we have the PCO track.
It does have the change order number on it under the short
Oh,
description.
I'm sorry.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then it
Um,
also has the PCO numbers.
Okay, and then the other question I have, just basic best practices. Are these PCOs, or is there any work that's being done at risk while these PCOs are being negotiated?
No, our team has a very tight structure where work will not, so when a contractor identifies a PCO, the contractor cannot proceed with work until a work directive is approved and signed. To avoid someone in the field saying, oh yeah, you know, go ahead and do that.
Right.
Without actually documenting it, negotiating it, and then coming back later and,
Okay.
you know, having issues, you know, dialing in exactly what happened. So we have a work directive form that identifies the exact scope, dollar amount, approach, and it goes through its own internal approval before the contractor is released to do the work.
Okay, so there's no hidden obligations
No.
outstanding that
No.
aren't reflected here. Thanks.
Good questions.
Another question, in the approved column, we have an X and we have pending. So X presumably means approved. And approved here, we're saying the board has approved it?
That's correct.
Okay. So none of these are marked as rejected by the board. So they're either pending or all approved. Do you happen to know offhand, during the fiscal 21-22 period, when we have to write our report, were any change orders rejected by the board?
No.
Has a change order ever been rejected by the board in your tenure?
Not that I know of.
Okay.
But what I mentioned before, PCOs that are individual line items within the change orders have been refused by our team in the field. And it does not become, you know, the PCO doesn't make it onto a change order if it gets refused.
And what's the, don't take this in the wrong way, but
No.
what is the incentive to negotiate a change order with the contractor as opposed to just pass it through for board approval, which seems to happen every single time?
Well, our team is in place so that things are not just passed through. So when when a potential change order is generated by a contractor, it's our team's job to study the plans. You know, if a contractor says this work was not shown on the plans, the architect missed this. It's our job to actually study the plans and confirm that, you know, that work is not shown on the plans and really is additional work that the contractors are owed money for. So contractors there, and that's where we get into our negotiations with them. If something is in a gray area, you know, you get to a negotiation on, you know, what's fair and acceptable. Some are refused, some are clearly not shown on a plan set, and then some, you know, one sheet shows something, one sheet has another note that's contrary, and you have to enter into negotiations, basically.
So it's your job, specifically your firm's job, to do this negotiating, right? And to pass the change order request to the board for approval?
I mean, the district is the final approval on, you know, the negotiation, approval or the deny, you know, whether they're refused, approved, or negotiated, the district is the one that gives the final approval on that.
And who at the district is?
Doesn't have construction staff. They don't have architects and engineers that are on the
That's what
approval
you're
part.
doing.
That's what you're.
Yes,
Yeah.
we do that. Then we communicate with the district. You know, for example, you know, Don Diaz, who is with the district and does have, you know, 30 years of construction experience. You know, he's in those meetings with us when we're negotiating. And we all come to an agreement on, how it lands, and then it goes to the board for approval.
So who's in those meetings now from the district? Since Dawn retired, I think last June or something, just for clarity
Well,
for the committee. What's that?
They're not, you said these meetings. I mean, they're discussions with.
Or discussion, I mean.
Discussions with the.
Yeah, so
contractor.
the discussions that you have with the contractor negotiation that Dawn used to be in representing the district, who represents the district now?
Martin is the interim bond program director.
Okay, so is he in those discussions?
Yes, we keep him updated on
He's
those
here,
discussions.
so he could speak for
Yeah.
himself, I guess. but-
Absolutely. Yeah, he's very involved, he knows.
Meetings every week, every week, weekly meetings, different contractors.
So Martin comes to our office and we go through every PCO and change order with him, explain everything, keep him updated, sometimes have to go back to contractors back and forth until we get an approval.
And sorry, well, your group does not receive any fees based on any of these contract change orders, correct?
No.
Or any
Does anybody-
incentive to,
Yeah.
on the flip side, is there any incentive for you, for your firm to negotiate hard on these change orders?
I mean, it's our
Other than your
fiduciary duty to the
fiduciary
district.
responsibility, right?
Correct.
You're not incentivized to stay below budget or stay under budget, right?
Like a completion
Incentivized?
bonus
No.
or something.
No, absolutely not.
There's no bonus or something after contract ends for
No,
staying.
no.
You should explain, you're a construction manager, right?
Yes.
Technically, right, so.
Well,
you're
I'm
acting-
the program
But you're
manager.
acting as the agent for the owner and.
That's correct.
advising, Right?
Yes.
So, which is typical, right, like from my experience, and a weekly PCO meeting is very typical, right? In which case you are doing the first pass probably of the review. Seeing if a claim is legitimate in any way, right, before it probably goes to him, so.
Correct.
When you dispute a PCO, what's generally the main reason or the most common reason you dispute a PCO?
I would need to go back and report back on that. I mean, we have one specific project that, we had a contractor that was, constantly, sending through illegitimate PCOs that we refuse. And then you have other situations where, contractors are, more fair and are not trying to go that direction, but.
But generally it's added a revised scope and not
Correct.
warranty work or something they messed up or.
That's correct.
Janet, do you, maybe you can enlighten us when the board receives these change orders for approval? What information are you getting? I mean, every single one is approved, so it doesn't sound like they're controversial when they reach the board.
Yeah.
How are
so-
you reviewing them and ensuring that the proper checks and balances have been done to approve them? And some of them are quite large, right? There's,
So all of that information will come on the board agenda that is the same info that's available to the public. So whatever's on the board the memo, all the attachments, all that is what the board reviews. And then typically board members will email questions prior to the board meeting. And then there's discussion at the board meeting if necessary.
okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so the change orders, when they go to the board, they come along with the board memo that highlights, the PCOs and explains them. And then it also has the attachment that has the change order, the PCO, our PCO cover sheet, and then the contractor's backup, down to the subcontractor's individual invoice and the exact work that was completed by them.
This is super helpful. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Of course, we won't have as many questions next time, I'm sure, but is that percentage that you negotiated from the original request by the contractor, let's say they asked for 50,000, you agreed on 30. Is that highlighted in that board memo? What the percent that you saved, if you will?
No.
It just would show the 30,000 final number that you agreed with the contractor, or?
That's correct.
I think that's industry standard. You would
Yeah.
negotiate rates. Documented. It's just whatever the final contract is, that's what it is.
Yeah, I was just curious if the board has visibility into the cost savings activities that you're doing on behalf of the district in these negotiations. Does that make sense? The question I'm asking?
Yeah, that's the same answer. There's no, the item that goes to the board does not show any, negotiated values on PCOs.
So how does the board evaluate whether you're doing a good job in your fiduciary
Great
responsibility?
Great question.
Maybe that's the more direct question.
Okay, back to where we started. The overall change order percentage across the entire project is the metric that you look at.
Okay.
So if, across the entire project, all contractors, you have your initial total contract value, and then you have your percentage of total change orders. And, our goal is to keep that under the 10% threshold and as close to zero as possible.
And you feel that's reflective of your ability to negotiate these change orders appropriately in the district's interest?
That is the metric that is looked at as an industry standard on the performance of, the construction or program manager.
I mean, that's only part of it.
It is part of it because
stuff that was unresolved from the get-go, and there's a lot to play into it, I'm sure.
there is, and also it depends on, how, what processes or the timeline that individual management company is involved in. So if a construction manager is hired and just given a plan set that's already completed and DSA approved, completed by an architect, approved by the state, they're handed a plan set. They could be handed a plan set that, is absolute garbage. And then the change order percentage could get high because the plans were bad, and you can't hold that to the construction management firm that just got handed that plan set. They can do their best to negotiate and refuse and try to keep that percentage low, but if you get a bad plan set and you weren't involved in the design process, there's not much that you can do. But
have you done any project closeout lessons learned initiatives yet, or is that still planned to move towards the Measure S project work?
have we done any?
Like lessons
I
learned to
mean,
basically pick up, like,
Yeah,
oh,
I mean,
we're
through the
doing it
entire,
again, which we are going to do it
I
again.
mean, every
We'll do
week
better.
through the entire program, we're
Yeah.
going through,
But
lessons learned.
Is there a mechanism that you're collecting those lessons learned? In like a central, in my past, we've collected them as like a form-based entry. So we have a database of lessons learned for associated projects and costs and impacts.
There's not like a list of lessons learned, but once we complete a project, we absolutely study the metrics of that project and then go back and discuss, if there are certain metrics that kind of stand out, we go back and we look, so what happened there? What architect were we working with? Were there any issues or the design we go back and we study, what could have happened, but.
Does that knowledge reside with the individuals on that project team though? Or is there ever a report or
Not that I know of, yeah.
It's generally internal.
Yeah.
Question. This
Oh.
is an important topic and not to be, I think, glossed over that part of our committee's objectives we just learned is to review cost savings efforts by the district. And it sounds like learning from past mistakes, whether it was on the part of the architect, the contractor, the district, whomever, and applying those to future projects to avoid change orders would be a good thing in general, right? So I think what I'm hearing the members ask is there a systematic way to record the learnings that help future projects operate more cost effectively? Is that
It's just such a great opportunity because you're essentially doing these all over again, but you've already done them. So now they can improve. But I mean,
our company does that, day after day, as we're working through projects and working through programs, we're learning lessons and, sharing them company-wide. I mean, we have a Monday morning meeting, company-wide, not just this program, where we discuss, what's happening in projects and, you know, how lessons learned and things like that. But there's no Redwood City Measure T lessons learned, you know, tracking report that you guys are kind of asking about.
Yeah, I think we also have to be really cautious. I mean, sure, we don't want to replicate mistakes that were made, but you know, Will can't really say, oh, ABC Architect did a
Right.
terrible job, because anybody could get a records request and then, you know, you could be sued by that architect because, well, what do you mean we did a terrible job? We finished this building for you, and now it's a public record that Redwood City thinks ABC Architect did a terrible job. So, you know, as a public agency,
Yeah.
sometimes
Well,
we have to skirt a fine line between some of the things,
That's a good point.
negative points as well
Right.
as positive points too. So-
Well, I think because we've gone so far into the weeds, I
Yeah.
just have one more question.
Sure, yeah.
You know, when it goes back to like the contract award for these scopes of work,
Mhm.
are you going lowest bid, lowest technically acceptable, best value trade-off? Like, because a lot of times this change order culture starts with how the award mechanism starts or is. And you know, lowest bidder often has some complications in the long run. But so how do we go about awarding these contracts?
Legally, you have to award the lowest bidder. I mean,
Okay.
it's the Cupco law, yeah.
Okay.
So
Like
the
leveling the
lowest
bids.
responsive bidder, yeah.
Lowest qualified.
Fully responsive bidder, so. Yeah,
So just on the last topic, I know we came out of the weeds, but I just have one question. Do you have any recommendations for how the Redwood City School District could retain the benefits of the lessons learned that have been derived from their bond project? So I mean, I understand your company has them, but how can the district, do you have any thoughts or recommendations on that?
I mean, I'll look to the district.
High level, I mean, I wouldn't go back and like to PCO levels and say like, oh, this piece of equipment needed this but very high level stuff would be really helpful too. Not pointing out businesses or companies that failed, scope changes even, and knowing something for the future. Really high level stuff should be, well, I wouldn't know, but hopefully easy enough to put down and document just for personnel turnover reasons. And I mean, we've seen it just within our committee.
I mean, it makes sense what you're asking, but I
not
don't
right.
think there's any official.
District has not
official
requested
document.
this from you.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, I
right.
mean, I'm thinking it through right now as you guys are asking it, and you know, it's like, I'm not sure how to respond. I mean, I would look to the district. Does the district have a tracking list of, you know, the lessons learned from the projects? Yeah,
From the previous projects?
yeah.
No.
I mean, I think that there are some ways to capture some things in a more positive way that wouldn't be detrimental. So for example, if a certain faucet was used and it failed or was difficult to install or it was faulty, then the district could change their district standards to not use a certain faucet and to use a different one. And then
Thank you for giving us a concrete example to visualize.
Yeah, Martin could speak that. Yeah, there you go.
That could be an example.
And that would be more of a design guideline, right?
Yeah, so we had faucets, for example, that we put in, right, we use different brands. There was a particular brand that failed, continued to fail. So we just continued that. Hey,
Right, yeah.
that was so good, you know, that's our track record, like, maintenance part.
I think in the spirit of the topic, which is on these big change orders, it's probably not a faucet, but it's something like, I don't know, I'm just, you know, when we do A, it seems to always lead to a cost overrun B. So that's a learning we should capture so that when we do these projects in the future, you know, we scope it accordingly. So.
But to that, like he just mentioned by law, they have to take the lowest bid. But have we ever done any analysis of the previous bids based on what this change order would have been to say the middle tier bid that might have been higher?
Oh, absolutely. So one of our projects, that was one of the rougher projects with a contractor, that was very difficult to work with. Once we completed the project, we went back and we looked at, they were the lowest bidder and we looked at the change order,
Mhm.
the total of the change orders
Percent.
that at the end of the project. And we compared it to the next lowest bidder, and it was, I believe it was actually less. And we said, man, that was 3 years of hell, getting through that project. But
Right.
we were able to bring the entire project with from the lowest bidder selected with all of their change orders in under the next lowest bidder. And that's without even that next lowest bidder would have had some change orders to bring that even higher. And it was still brought in, right there. So we absolutely look at that at the end of every project.
But, and you're seeing that consistently though, that the lowest bidders giving you. the
No,
best-
that was just one project specifically, one
Okay.
of the big projects that
Okay.
was really difficult. I remember specifically us having that kumbaya moment at the end when we studied it. Oh my
Quality of
God, we
work.
just went through hell for 3 years, but the district got the project completed, a beautiful new building with all change orders included for less than the next lowest bidder. So that was a positive moment for us to kind of, celebrate the overall project coming in, lower than that next lowest bidder.
Okay.
I have a random question. Are there any DEI qualifications when awarding projects?
I don't know. What DEI?
Diversity, equity, and inclusion. Are you
I would
doing
need to-
women-owned contractors? Are you doing minority-owned contractors, veterans?
All RFPs have.
Or does that figure into?
Oh,
I
is it
don't think
RFP?
that there are certain. I don't think so. We would need to look into that and report back.
I mean, that might just be something that district needs to,
And actually, I'm sorry. So what was the question specifically?
like, is any of that considered or?
In the contract selected.
Yeah, whether it's in the RFP or not, is that taken into account? And I don't know if you can. if you're
And so
really
they're
truly
not-
Looking at lowest bidder.
Yeah, I mean, our RFPs are different than public bids. And so all these construction projects are, actual hard public bids that follow the CUPCA legal process. So I guess you said DEI, like a DEI contractor
like
could get
incentivizing-
pre-qualified, and if they were the lowest bidder, they would win.
Okay.
So there's no incentives, it's just the CUPCA legal law. The lowest bidder wins, the lowest pre-qualified responsive
Right.
bidder wins.
But couldn't it be factored into no bid
No bid?
contracts? Like, are
Which
you,
is
are you,
next
are you
topic, I think.
picking
Oh, I
any
see.
vendors subjectively without going through that lowest bidder process where it could be factored in?
I mean, we would need to discuss a response to that. You're saying, are we trying to select contractors that are minorities to do that lower work, no bid work?
Has a inclusion policy, like a diversity policy, and it's come into play during your work. So I think everybody understands it probably wouldn't have been there in the beginning, but the question is just,
There one now.
is there a process now that the district has that in anything that you can control
So
to?
for example, if a no bid contract went out for fire alarm apparatus,
I mean, there's a lot of contracts on here.
Yeah. could it go to a minority or women-owned business or some other
It absolutely could.
optimized based on the district's?
But the district
policy?
hasn't directed you to do that, is what we're hearing, right?
No.
Okay.
No.
Does the
Not to
ven-
your fault, I'm just curious. if
Yeah,
that's
no,
the
I'm
common
just
standard.
trying to make sure that I'm responding to the questions you guys are asking.
Yeah,
No, the
You are
district-
doing a great job, so thank you.
I know.
Yeah, I'm trying to. So the district has not directed us to
Prefer a contractor for.
to select a no, to go with a specific contractor based on like a minority or whatever you're talking about. No.
Is there anyone in the district that can?
Look at
The
that.
state has.
give in?
Catch up.
Yeah.
We can look at it. We
Yeah,
can look at it, but again, we have to go with the lowest bid, so.
Well, that's why.
That's why I said no bid.
I think we were
That's
talking
why,
about.
that's why the. no
Well,
bid
so the
question came up.
no bid.
There's a lot of no bid contracts, I think is the one, the area we're focused on. Could those be, is the district interested in directing them in a certain way?
And honestly, even with the lowest bidder, there might be some that happen to be.
There could be,
MPWB, and
absolutely.
Knowing that would be
There
great.
could
for
be.
transparency.
I mean, on the no bid contract, yeah. I'll look to the district to respond to that piece of it. I mean, I don't know how to respond to that.
We're looking.
Yeah.
But your answer was complete in that you have not so been directed.
Mhm.
on-
It has to go forward.
Sure.
I can't say we're doing it because it has to go. you guys have to approve it.
Okay.
This,
I think my one uncomfortable takeaway, Will, is that if the district were to decide tomorrow that they no longer want to use your services and they want to use someone else's, you've collected all this knowledge. I think we all heard that there's tremendous amount of knowledge. But my discomfort is that there's no way that it gets passed to the district to preserve beyond working with you.
Well, the district is working with us on all of these projects, so they, would be collecting this with us.
There was a representative there as well, reviewing the PCOs.
I mean,
So
yeah, you got kind of lost me there, Carl.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I guess it's in people's heads, right? It's in your head, it's at your firm, it's in Martin's head because he sat in on those, but it's not written down anywhere for future generations to know when we buy valves or whatever faucets, that we shouldn't use this brand because it leads to a lot of change orders. And I'm not saying it's good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just kind of characterizing what I've heard. That it's knowledge in people's heads, but it's not institutionalized.
Silence confirms you're accurate.
Okay.
Institutional knowledge
Yeah.
that is something that gets lost in all of these programs. Like,
Sure,
that is
absolutely.
just,
I'm sure Don Diaz walked away with tons of knowledge that wasn't passed to Martin, and when he goes, lots won't be passed along.
We joke about how we wish we could plug a hard drive into the back of Don Diaz's head.
Yeah, I'm
and
sure, I'm sure.
but you probably call them all the time as well, right?
We do, absolutely.
Or 29 years ago.
Okay, so that helps.
I know.
He left binders and stuff.
No, I have, so I have, yeah. I have a backup.
And as far as like products and things, that portion, like if we're using that as a reference, that is retained, right, in some design standard, right? Like,
Martin and I have been on the phone with Don today, and Martin has been looking in has been studying binders that Don left behind today, looking for exactly what you guys are asking. So they have a plan room at the facilities yard that has, all the documentation and history of, every project and everything that's been done. And that would be your, lessons learned dump, I guess, is every, the full document history package that the district has, in their plan room, and the team that's involved with that is what I think.
I'll just throw this out to you, Will, and you can come back at the next meeting if you'd like to answer. I would say, to summarize, what would you like the public to know about cost saving measures with respect to change orders on district bond projects?
I guess we'll get back to you at the next meeting on
Okay.
that.
And it's perfectly fine to say, we look for cost savings measures on every single change order, and we try and.
No, that's absolutely true. Not just every change order, every PCO. I think I said that earlier.
Yeah.
But I will be excited to report back on, the change order percentages, individual contracts, individual projects at the next meeting. Yeah.
Okay. Any other discussion on change order 612? That was a healthy discussion. 613, no bid contracts executed by the district since the last meeting. We just started to talk about that with respect to DEI objectives. Does anyone have anything they'd like to bring up or ask about with respect to the no bid contract list?
I do. Before we go into any weeds, what's the standard used to determine when it can go no bid versus when it
Great question. So under $60,000, no bids required. $60,000 to $200,000, you follow the CUPCA process. There's a list of CUPCA contractors that the district holds and keeps updated. It's called an informal bid, and over $200,000 is called an official formal hard bid that has to be advertised, twice in newspapers. So those are the three categories: under 60K, no bid; 60K to 200K, CUPCA process, informal bid; 200,000 and above official formal hard bid, 2 advertisements in the newspaper. Plan rooms, etc.
Just as an example on you've got one on here, KYA is the vendor, install play structure, soft flooring, $90,000. So that would fall in that second category, right? It's above 60.
So there are other circumstances, certain piggyback type agreements, CMOS type agreements, that can allow you to go above the $60,000 threshold. So there are certain situations that are kind of outliers, I guess.
Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Did you have a follow on? Oh.
So just trying to understand, like, if I was gonna look for abuse of that, I'd look for ones that are just under that 60K, right? On the same day with the same entity. So what's the process around those? Like, I look at the Dryco ones, right? That could easily be one big project of asphalt and be 100K, but they're broken into 55 and 59. How do I understand that?
I mean, Dryco does make up a
big chunk
of these no bid contracts. When you total it up, it's about a quarter of the no bid contracts.
Yeah,
And they're all in that just under 60. Or
could they, I mean, to your point, could they be dividing up, pieces so that they don't have to be bid out, I guess is the question.
Well, they're at 2 different sites, so they're 2 different projects.
Yeah, I mean, Dryco is one of the strongest, asphalt site work type contractors that has had the most manpower availability and some of the best prices. So that's the reason that the district continues to ask them for proposals on the no bid under 60K threshold work.
So the district scopes the size of the projects and could be bundling them where they would then require a bid, or breaking them up where they fall in the no bid. I'm not challenging. I'm just trying to understand what happens
I get it. No, so I mean, if a project, if there was a project that we asked for a price from a contractor and it was, $100,000, then you have to go through the full CUPCA informal bid process, unless you have some kind of CMOS or piggyback type agreement that would allow you to, contract at a higher value.
Right. I guess I'm just trying to understand, Rick, your point. You say like, oh, those are at 2 different school sites, so that's obvious. But then there's other ones that are all sites. So if you had scoped it as an all sites asphalt that day.
Well, I think too, I understand what you're saying. I think too that we're looking at this from the board date, right? So these may have not been, they were approved on the same date. That doesn't mean the projects were in line with each other. And the quote for one site could have been in the works for 3 months. The other one could have been in the work for 3 weeks. It just happened to go to the board on that date, right? So there wasn't an asphalt project at 3 school sites simultaneously where we said, we need quotes for these. Oh, if you make them under 60 grand, we'll just give them to you, right? That would be bid split, right? And that's not what we're trying to do. Certainly there's always economies of scale when you look at this, right? Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But something could have come up with one of these sites that was unforeseen, right? That we had to go and do asphalt to that end. So I think I'm not trying to pawn this off. I think there's some coincidental outwardity or whatever that word is at 9 o'clock tonight. That's happening with board approval dates and projects that look similar, but it doesn't mean they were part of a larger project that was split up to meet this threshold. Because we could do 3 $60,000 projects under informal bid, and Demco would probably still get all 3 projects for $180,000. So we take that into account as well.
Do you ever see multiple no bids for one site? Would that be a flag for the auditor? If there was like Geico that said, okay, 59, but oh, I forgot there was the side parking space that I needed to do as well for another 8 or something. Does that ever come up? Just out of curiosity.
You mean, so we have a contract for 59,000 and a change order for 10%, right?
Or if it's another no bid, would it be a PCO if it was the same site?
Well, it depends on what the project was, right?
Okay.
With asphalt, we would hope that we would spec it all for that one.
Okay.
for that one instance, if it wasn't part of the larger project.
Well, I think there's also economy to award where all these small projects, if you tried to bundle them into a larger project, there's a duration to award that you get into. And then also the cost of producing that contract is also higher. So I mean, sometimes it just makes sense to have these smaller, quicker awards. So I would assume that's, sorry to put words in.
No, dear, I think what you said is right, yeah.
I will say though, I've worked with Dryco, they're fine, and I stopped working with them because they were the cheaper sub, but their quality wasn't as good as some of the others, which wouldn't be something we could do here anyways, like Anza or McGuire and Hester. Would, I would say, perform better, but they cost more. But I mean, it would make sense that even if you bid them out, they would be competitive. It's highly related. But question, do you do any contracts that are job order classification? Which are, it's like, yeah, Gordon
I
does it,
don't know.
I think the county does it for construction projects, and it's like,
I haven't heard that term. So
What does that mean?
It's a job.
certain contractors that, like, if they formulate what the work is, the whole scope is broken out into, like, literally you can break down to like nails needed, screwdriver, whatever, equipment, every part of the scope. There's a price and listed in this Bible of costs.
I don't
Yeah.
believe so.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
It looks like for this period that, other than the pending no bid contracts, all were approved by the board. Do you recall any no bid contracts that have not been approved by the board?
I don't believe so.
Okay, and then specifically for last fiscal year where we have to write our report back on this question, were there any no bid contracts from fiscal 21-22? I think I have that right, that were not approved by the board?
I don't believe so.
Okay. All right, other questions or? It's funny, I sent an email to Will saying, oh, you don't have to come to the meeting, Will. We don't have you on the formal agenda. Thank you for showing up.
Absolutely, yeah, no problem.
Well,
They're all good questions.
Yeah, and I think too, for this committee to hear, you know, and Will and I talked this morning, he told me about the email, but Will's an extension of our program, right? Him and our GM Kramer are our bond program managers, right? So they're working on our behalf with all of the things that Will talked about tonight in coordination with Martin, myself, Dr. Baker, as we go through this, right? So we've brought them on as our bond program managers to be an extension of our district so that we don't have to go and hire individual people that we'd have a harder time getting to run our program for us. So I just want everyone to also know that it's more than just sitting here and answering questions. They are an extension of our organization.
Clearly, yes, thank you for that. And I just comment that normally Will would present on the agenda, at least in my tenure, an update on the bond projects at these meetings. And I suggested just in the order of time, and it was probably a good move that we not do it this time because we had so many other things. But as I mentioned to you in the email, Will, if you wanted to share that with the committee, you know, outside of the regular meeting, just send around an update on the projects. I'm sure it would be very appreciated because we always like that report and it gives you a chance to show off the great work that's being done.
Absolutely.
Okay, moving on to 614, then we have a list of the new bond projects that have been approved by the board since the last meeting. And that's attachment 614, totaling looks like $2.5 million in new projects with approval dates. Any questions from the committee members on this roughly, I guess, what, about 15 new projects that have been approved?
And just for the record, this goes back to December 8th of 2021. We brought in all projects.
Okay, so this is
because that had not been presented before in this format, so we went back.
good point of clarification. Thank you.
When you say all projects, what do you mean?
The board approved project lists that were outside of the scope of the major projects.
But these are still Measure T funded.
Correct. Yes.
And most of them are recent because that was when you started to spend the money, the leftover money, right? After you saw that the major projects were finishing up.
Correct.
So this was all contingency fund or leftover funds from it?
Or cost savings or additional revenue brought in through those measures that will allow us to do projects beyond our original anticipated scope.
Could you speak to EV chargers? I see those charged to the bond fund about 100,000, it looks like. I know that there was a separate fund that was, I can't remember if it was PG&E or the state or something funded EV chargers and infrastructure and such. What are these specific three that are paid for out of the bond by the district from the district bond
And
fund?
these are associated with the new construction projects. So these are the new classroom building projects that have, new parking lots. There are EV chargers right there near the new buildings.
And these couldn't be funded under the same, whatever the initiative
No,
was?
we tried.
Okay.
The PG&E EV, that's a great question. The PG&E EV charge network program was, they had money years ago and we took advantage of as much of it as we could. I think we were able to do just under 100 chargers at 4 sites. There were strict requirements to be able to get the PG&E grant. You had to be able to do like over 18 or 20-ish chargers per site. And the district was able to leverage, it was multi-million dollars worth of grants from PG&E to support those projects. But there was those grants did not apply, and I believe the money had all run out. So these ones were, purchased by the district through Measure T to support the new construction project.
Could you comment on rear parking lot at Garfield paving of, 800,000?
Absolutely.
Garfield was a big project. Was there a reason this wasn't included in the scope of the overall project?
Yeah, so Garfield is an interesting site because if any of you have been there, there's no street parking and there are no parking lots or anything near the site. There's a church next door that I believe you guys have tried to negotiate with and get them to let you use that as additional parking for staff, but the site didn't have enough, just didn't have enough parking. So as part of the original design package, there was an expanded parking lot. So we expanded the front parking lot and the teachers and staff began using it. Of course, the parents have their stalls for parents as well. There still wasn't enough parking for the staff to be able to adequately park there. And so the board approved an additional rear parking lot with, leftover contingency money so that their staff would be able to park on site.
Did that take away the baseball field that was back there?
Nope.
No, okay.
Took over the church. Yeah.
But yeah, no,
But that was not envisioned
I know
in the
that was
original Garfield project. You're saying that.
At a parking lot expansion was absolutely envisioned, but the parking lot expansion still was not enough. And so I know that project was really, really well taken by the site because now the staff are adequately able to park at the site and walk in to teach rather than, going all over neighborhoods all over the town. Yeah.
Like that would be a lessons learned. I would love documented, that type of a thing where like there wasn't enough parking. We should be assured before the project begins or goes in for planning that parking stalls are enough.
I know that gets put into the print. Like, for example, we get the funnel and then like just say like you have I don't know, we call them like 1 2 degrees. So the final, the one before the final, we would make notes of it. Right.
Yeah, and I know that
We put notes on exactly saying, hey, the parking lot because of this missing.
And the architects, I believe the architects are the ones that study, the site, the number of teachers and number of staff. And, we said we need to expand this parking lot. So, they study it, they put together, the quantities, we review it, it makes sense. And then you build it and it actually starts getting used, a bunch of parents influx, parking all the stalls. There's no parking available on the street. The staff are trying to find parking. They can't park to get there. And so that was kind of what drove it there. But absolutely, I hear you loud and clear that, that could be a potential lessons learned.
So it wasn't part of the master plan? The original
Parking was.
But not the rear. The rear expansion was. Okay.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong on this one. I remember with Garfield, there was the plan to expand that front parking lot. It wasn't really considered by the architects as that was never even a parking area, but it was used by construction workers.
Oh, you're talking about the rear area. Yeah,
So
we
once
created
that
a laydown area, yeah.
Sort of became a parking lot.
Yeah.
Suddenly everybody was like.
I think that was the
"We
trigger,
can
yeah.
Actually add more parking spaces.
Yeah, and the big thing was without disturbing the city shared field that's used for soccer, baseball, and making sure that the parking lot was protected from the baseball field with the higher fence, et cetera.
One more from me, and can you talk about the last one, MUB in-wall tables at Henry Ford? Does anyone know what that is?
Martin, do you want to speak to that?
Or in pocket lunch tables that come out.
Like in the
I
cafeteria.
don't know if you've seen the cafeteria.
Uh-huh.
You put up, you can use the building for multiple things, play basketball, whatever.
Is this the new building? No, wait, this is Henry Ford.
Henry
So
Ford. It's not,
Existing, but
was
it's
this
not
building
building.
renovated under?
23 years old.
Okay, so how do because equipping is only for facilities that have been renovated or built per what we discussed earlier. So how would tables in an existing room be bond appropriate spending?
It'd be considered part of the modernization of that site, I believe.
And modernization of this MUB room building, or what does MUB stand for?
Multi-use building. Yeah, the entire site was modernized. So when an entire site's modernized, the architects go through and look at existing buildings and, you know, what they need additionally. At the time, you know, the architects, you know, either the tables didn't have the issue, or I mean, I don't know what the exact situation was, but it's an add-on to the overall modernization of that site. And yeah.
I believe that building stays where it is in the master plan even for future work, so it makes sense to do it. It's not gonna be undone.
Off the top of my head, I believe the tables were a safety issue.
Absolutely, absolutely.
You had to keep them down to some of the brackets. So they were up.
are these projects complete? Most of them?
Not these penny ones.
These are, okay.
But not the, it's important.
Yeah, the last four that were just approved by the board on April 26th were approved as budgetary. And so those are all, you know, working through procurement right now. Minus the MUB and wall tables, which, you know, procurement's completed. But the work has not been completed yet.
Other questions or discussion on 614? All right, so that closes out 6-1. I think it was a very healthy discussion, very educational for the committee. Thanks to the district and Will for preparing the materials and going through and answering a lot of questions on them. I know I found it to be a really good use of the committee's time, so thank you. 6-2, any update from the district on filling what used to be 2, but I guess it's now 3 vacancies?
Yeah, I'll make this brief in the interest of time. We are still continuing outreach between our communications department as well as Dr. Baker has met with several local organizations lately. And at this point, we expect to fill in the next, I'll say in June potentially. So there'll be, our goal is to have it fully seated for the August meeting.
With the 2 or now the 3 vacancies?
It would be with the 3.
Okay.
Perhaps we still have to have more discussion about that as we move forward, but we'll come back and let you guys know what's going on with that.
Any thing else on 6-2? Okay, thanks, Rick. 6-3, the website, which has gone through changes and has been a topic of interest by the public about making information easily accessible. And that's certainly one of our key objectives, is that what happens in this room is great, but we need to have the public be informed. So this was just an open discussion on the current state of the website, whether we want to suggest changes to it. The district runs it. And any comments about how it's working today and if it needs to change. And at 9 o'clock, it may be people are out of ideas, but
You sent an example website that seems.
I did send around one that I can't remember the name of it now. I pinged a few people. Do you have any, some of these California CBOC folks? I asked, hey, well, what does a great website look like? And I'm still waiting to get some responses, but there was one that was sent, and happy to share the link for the minutes. I can send it to you, Olivia, but does anyone have it handy?
That Whittier one. My only feedback would be, I would like to see our website and even materials like the agenda be more accessible for our Spanish speaking population. And we know, like, if you need disability accommodation, but we should have a provision that also says the same thing in Spanish and makes it more readily accessible. But Whittier's looked good, but didn't do that. Didn't accomplish that.
So the one that the example that I had sent was South Whittier School District. It was just one, not picked for any other particular reason. I'll provide the link to you, Rick and Olivia, if you want to put it in the minutes. And for those who want to go look at what appealed to me about it was very simple. There's no, it's not stylistically elegant or beautiful, but it has all of the information in one page. It's the members, it's the agenda, it's the open applications, it's all the audit reports, it's the CBOC reports, it's the state of the projects, and it's just very easy to find in one place anything you'd want to know about what the Bond Oversight Committee is doing. So does anyone have any other suggestions or comments on this topic? And then I guess the question to the district would be, if the committee would like to see some changes in the CBOC portion of the district website, what would be the best way to communicate these requests?
Through you, Carl, to me. So if you will gather them, if there are multiple, and then forward those all to me, then we can discuss how we can implement those.
Does anyone want to volunteer to work with me on this topic as maybe a ad hoc, whatever the it says in the bylaws, ad hoc subcommittee or a committee, or?
Rick, you'll have to look at the board. We change it.
Carl, I need to step away. I have a family issue that came up, so apologize, everybody.
Thank you. I thought you were volunteering to help with the website committee.
Sorry to get your hopes up.
Is that not the case?
No.
Does anyone want to volunteer or just trust me?
I can do it.
Carl, you want to work with
Yeah.
the two Carls?
Yep.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Okay, do we have to do anything to formally execute a committee?
Nope.
Okay, great.
Not
So
an ad hoc one.
the two Carls have taken an action item to put a proposal forward to the district to update the website. Okay, that is 6:3, and we're almost to the end of Measure T. Agenda topics for the next meeting. And then we'll just discuss Measure S updates briefly from the district, and then we'll adjourn. For the next meeting, does anyone have any topics beyond the what I would call the typical things that we would cover in one of these meetings? Is there anything that anyone would like to see on the next agenda?
I would just remind the committee that Jacqueline had feedback to provide from the school site. I don't know if that's something, I don't know what the topic is, to know whether that's an agenda item or something for hearing.
She never even got a just chance to address her.
Thank
issue.
you for bringing
She
that
wanted to
up.
bring
So
up a site issue.
thanks, Martin.
Gracias. Mi preocupación o como madre, ¿no? Lo que quería transmitirles era cómo esta organización, ¿no? Ayuda o procura la equidad para el uso de los recursos. Porque sabemos que las diferentes escuelas, ahorita, por ejemplo, en estos proyectos, No veo a Hoover. I can't. ¿Me puede ayudar?
Yes, I can.
Hi, I'm here to interpret.
Gracias.
Okay, awesome. Yes, my concern is as a mother, how does this organization ensure equity of the use of the resources? As we know, for instance, there's many schools. For instance, here, I don't see Hoover, for example.
So, algunas, o sea, quizá está, pero con una cantidad pequeña de lo que se va a gastar, y considero que hay muchas necesidades en la escuela, como el aire acondicionado. Los salones son muy calientes en el verano. El sistema de seguridad que identificamos que a través del tiroteo que hubo en el parque de al lado, el sistema de seguridad no era el apropiado. Entonces, claro que nos preocupa la seguridad de nuestros hijos, ¿no? Sabemos que la comunidad de ahí presenta pues este tipo de situaciones, ¿no? Entonces nos preocupa eso, ¿no? La seguridad, el aire acondicionado, en el área de preescolar,
Un segundo, okay?
Sí.
And we know that, yes, maybe Hoover was here, but the amount of money allocated for Hoover is very small in relation to the rest. For instance, Hoover has many needs. The AC system is very antiquated. We have very warm summers and the classrooms are very hot. Also, our security system is not up to par. There was a shooting at the park next door to us. So as parents, this is very concerning for us, the security of our children. And our community feels that these are very difficult challenges, and we would like some equity in this regard with the AC system, security.
Además, el área de juegos de los más chiquitos de preescolar no es accesible para los niños en silla de ruedas, por ejemplo, ¿no? Porque aparte de que hay que subir una rampita, ya cuando suben la rampa tiene cachitos de troncos, o sea, como no es una superficie lisa. Los niños no se pueden deslizar si tuvieran silla de ruedas, si usan muletas, no podrían accesar a esos juegos. Me refiero a la zona de los más pequeños.
Also, in regards to the play structure for the littlest kids, the pre-K area, the play structure is not accessible to kids with wheelchairs or even crutches. There's a ramp, but the ramp is not over a smooth surface, so someone with a wheelchair or crutches would not be able to access it. I'm referring to the pre-K playground.
Y tampoco tiene ninguna sombra. Están los juegos calientes cuando los niños van a jugar y a veces pues simplemente no pueden jugar porque son demasiado calientes, no hay sombra que les proteja.
There's also no shade. The play structure, the sun hits directly, so it's very hot. The kids can't play on there, and there's also no shade, very warm, very hot.
Otra preocupación que tenemos es que en los salones que son destinados para educación especial, en los corredores están ocupados por las sillas de ruedas que sabemos que son grandes o voluminosas y ocupan ese espacio para, pues están en el paso, ¿no? Entonces, quizás si algunos fondos se pudieran destinar a edificios, no sé, de mejor acceso para los niños de educación especial que están en Hoover. No sé si correspondan estos comentarios aquí, ¿verdad? Pero bueno, son las preocupaciones que como padres hemos, o como mamá he escuchado de otros padres que he visto en las escuelas, porque mi hija tiene 4 años en esa escuela, la conozco muy bien. Y pues también agradezco la oportunidad que me dan de compartir estas ideas porque pues de la misma manera quisiera aprender cómo más padres pueden involucrarse y y cómo poder hacer más eficientes los recursos de manera equitativa.
Another concern is in regards to special ed classrooms. The hallways are constantly used in that section for wheelchairs. As we know, wheelchairs can be very bulky, so they're always on the way. I feel that maybe some funds should be allocated to focus on this issue, have more accessibility in this regard. And also, I'm not sure if my comments are appropriate for this forum or not, but as a parent, these are my concerns and the concerns of other parents in our school. My daughter has been at Hoover for the past 4 years, so I know my daughter very well and I know her needs. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my concerns with you all. And I look forward for the opportunity to learn more about how us as parents can be more involved in making these decisions for the well-being of our children.
De manera equitativa.
In an equitable way.
So those will go before the board. So I listed the items. Señora que estaba estableciendo, yo voy a hablar en inglés primero y usted puede traducirlo en español.
Sí, ella
ella
lo
puede
está
escuchar.
traduciendo, yo estoy escuchando lo que ella dice en español.
Sí.
Okay. Well, I'll take this to the board. This is part of what the board does, and it meets with myself and Martin and Will and his team on the other items that will be possibly put on the list because that still remain that are requests from community members. The part about Hoover got the main gymnasium. And yeah, I think some of you probably all went and saw that, right? I don't know how many millions of dollars that gymnasium cost.
Yeah. Hoover was the fourth largest project budget out of the 16 sites. And it does have a cutting edge security system as well.
Right.
It was 17.8 million.
As of
Is-
last, the prior report.
Yeah,
Right.
two reports ago.
Right. So with that being, and I know about the air conditioning, that is something that we've heard from many community members within Redwood City, not only at Hoover, but district-wide. Yeah. So the board has really taken that into heavy consideration. We look forward with Measure S because of the needs that the children, the parents, the teachers have communicated that loud and clear during the time when we were moving forward to get the bond passed. The other piece regarding the play structures, the shade, the play area, that's something that we can bring to the board and see what dollars are left and if we can still manage that in some fashion or look at Measure S as it moves forward. But at the same time, for Measure S, there are many different types of plans already in place for this next phase. And when we get to Hoover, we'll have to meet with the community. Is that still what we want? Or is it not? Do we go in a different direction?
Are you meeting with every school community?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
So the master plan will be updated accordingly for Measure S and the time.
right, exactly.
So I think maybe to summarize, thank you, Dr. Baker. I think to summarize, this committee really looks retroactively, right? We're looking at things already approved, projects already built, money already spent. It's the district and the board's responsibility to select projects, spend money, complete construction. So these comments are really important to hear. This is probably not the right forum for them. So the question, Dr. Baker, I think is if the public has an interest in proposing certain projects or speaking about areas in schools that should be improved with bond money, what's the process that we should be telling?
Should come before the board and exactly as she has done. So for these items that have come before you tonight that are with the additional dollars that we saved, PTOs, school site councils have to come before the board and ask if there are extra dollars, could this be done? And so what I hear from Hoover, there is definitely some of the items here are some of the items for the next phase because of items that were expressed. But then there are smaller items like the play structure. The shade, we would have to look and see what that looks like. The shade shelter, I would put at many different school sites where you have a lunch covering? Is that what's needed? Or is it, what we did at Selby Lane was the
Umbrellas.
the umbrellas, we did the umbrellas at Selby Lane.
Yeah, the picnic table.
Right.
Because there wasn't enough, the code wouldn't allow us to put
the
the
shelter.
shelter because it was too close to the building.
Right.
Didn't Hoover get umbrellas too?
Hoover, I believe, did get.
For every level of Selby.
I think I guess,
They do have umbrellas and it's right there in the section where
Yeah.
the library is.
Eating area.
Yeah,
But-
but Jacqueline pointed out that the new play structure, the little kids can't play there because
Right,
it's
so
too
I'm
hot for
getting
them to go.
back
Okay.
So the play structure, that's an item that if if there are dollars left over, that's something that we can bring before the board and say, here's another item. How much does the play structure cost? We can check with Will to see what they cost at, I think there was one that's in at Roosevelt and.
Right. Kinder teacher.
Yeah, the kindergarten.
We got a few that we pull out.
Right. So we can, we know what the cost is. Do the reference of going out and seeing where it would be placed.
No, absolutely. Like right now, as we speak, we have 3 vendors that are proposing on the Roosevelt play structures, different options, so that we can understand, the exact current market value of, different sizes and different options that'll fit within the approved budget. So absolutely, it's up out of there.
So her comments tonight, I'm gonna take back to the board and Janet's here, so. she-
Sure. But I guess the question I have is a more general one, that it's great because she's here in this she's a committee member, she gets to talk to you directly, and you, Janet, get to hear this directly. But if someone comes up to one of us as committee members and says, oh, you're on the bond committee, we need a new blah, blah, blah. I want to be able to tell them, well, I can't really help you with the new blah, 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 but this is the process that you follow to get this on the district's radar. And I guess my question is, am I supposed to go to the site council, the principal? Do I go to my
Please do.
board member?
We have board meetings twice a month. There's oral communication. We're online. You don't have to be present. You can do it online and just express your concerns and what your needs are. We've never turned away.
They can email the board too.
People do that almost every meeting.
Yeah.
Okay,
But she's still a subcommittee member, and we're all parents representing a school or schools, plural, in some capacity or the other. I've asked questions about, Orion before, just out of curiosity, so, to be fair, I think that, I think she's just very curious about her own homeschool. Makes sense, because we're all, you are curious about where the district will go with certain programs. I think we all have expressed that we're here for Measure S to find where the funding would be, where would it go to, how it's gonna get allocated. I'm not saying we all have a hidden agenda, but we do have, some.
as long as it's
possible-
not a bully pulpit to,
I think it is, but
Yeah.
I'm sure that
Yeah.
we all have, interest in wanting to know where things are.
Requests for upcoming projects, ones that have not been done yet, need to go to the board.
Of course, yeah. No, I'm
But
not-
that's my
I'm not-
question,
I'm
is
just
the-
saying that her comments, okay.
does the parent go directly to the board member, or does the district have an intake process for ideas? That was my question. And it sounds like,
Idea of, there'll be a process for intake of ideas and we see what happens with Measure S. At this point in time, there's a small amount of money that's left. And we have had individual parents, individual community members come before the board and ask, what about this? And
Okay.
we take it and we created a list, a priority list.
okay, because I have an idea, so I want to know how to do it too.
Well, and that's. what
I'm
I
gonna come to the
said, one
board then.
request too. These are ones
You
that
can
came
do
to
that.
us.
Yeah.
After the facilities after.
So I have a vested interest in knowing how the process works, because I have an idea.
Send me an email.
Okay. Will do.
And it brings them right back. All board members bring their emails back at the end of a board meeting. And it's, they can put on the next.
And how do you, maybe this is off topic, or maybe it's an agenda item I'm just gonna propose it as an agenda item for the next meeting, how
Maybe
the
we have
district
to
prioritizes.
Prioritize it for board, let the board discuss it, because it's really a board activity, it's a board proactive measure, they need to do it. That's their responsibility.
There was
Absolutely.
One operational comment that she had where, about the storage in the, hallways. I think there were wheelchairs.
There's wheelchairs.
Making it difficult to access the areas. That's a life safety issue with.
That's an ADA issue, but that's something that we'll look at right away. Yeah. I'll take Will and Mark.
So my proposal is to have an agenda item at the next meeting where the district can present how you prioritize bond project spending. And it'll be very timely because Measure S is going to spend a lot of money. And it'll be informative, I think, to the committee how the decision-making process, we know it gets approved by the board. But how does, if there are 500 ideas, how do 4 of them get to the board? Some kind of winnowing process is happening, and just to have some visibility as to how that happens.
Yeah, the board discussion at the previous board meeting when the budget was presented. Yeah, we did.
About how the projects get prioritized?
No, about all the projects and the prioritization. Yeah.
Okay. Other agenda.
sorry,
Sorry.
I
Yes,
just wanna
please.
Participate in this conversation. So, I would just note that Jacqueline is now the second committee member to raise equity and concerns about how equity is being looked at and addressed in these decisionings. I was the first, and it wasn't addressed at that time. So we're getting, it's been raised a couple of times by different board members. And so I would again repeat what I had requested before, which was information or a presentation from the board on how they factor in equity in making these decisions. And then I just wanted to share to make sure we all level set and have the same understanding that there was a master plan a long time ago before the last bond measure that looked at all the things they wanted to do in the district. And I'm going to grossly misstate this, so feel free to correct it, that there wasn't enough money in the first bond. And so they prioritized about half the work. Well, whatever it was, a third, with the plan to go for a new bond to do the rest of the work in that big.
Another third, there's 3 phases.
Okay, but in the big master plan, and so 4-ish school sites, 3 or 4, Garfield, Taft, Hoover, and is it Kennedy? That got the bulk of the work in the first phase. Orion got most of the money from the last 7 years of bond work. And then the other schools haven't had very much. And some of that is reflected in this one, and it goes by school, and it shows how much, at least as of last year, were spent. So Hoover has had a significant investment in it, but the district couldn't do all of the schools and all of the projects because there was never enough money in there. And so some of the schools have gotten significantly less than Hoover and are waiting for future bond measures. But it raises the equity question. And just, I think you were on the phone when I asked it, but I asked if we could look at by student how we've allocated spend to make sure that we're thinking about all of the students across the district, across the planning. And so just echoing that equity should be front of mind, and we should maybe hear how it's being handled.
The age of the building. Some of these buildings.
Right. Yeah, I had asked that. It doesn't actually align.
So-
Rick provided the age of the buildings and it doesn't align to that.
I've suggested an agenda item, and let me know if this, so for the next meeting, to discuss how new spending will be prioritized, what the process is, not to discuss the priorities, but just to understand the process, including how equity is being considered in the master plan review. Would that satisfy your request to hear something on the topic? If
Yeah,
the district is
I had
willing to
requested it
present
before. I'm just pointing out, we've heard it twice now.
Okay.
Yeah, that's not to, I'm just saying, I don't know if that's for us as much as it is for the board.
Well, for us, we want to be aware of cost savings measures and right, that could be, so knowing how the process, the prioritization and selection process works might help us, this is just my take, might help the committee understand where these cost saving suggestions could be introduced. If you're willing to go with the flow here for a minute.
I expect that it would be a brief update from the district letting us know that they have not factored equity in, but there's been 2 board members who've now asked how equity is factored in.
Yeah, and I mean, that borders on another question of saying about a curiosity, why did Hoover get the, $70 million, whatever, I don't know the net number, I apologize, but the money just for the gym when there possibly could have been more other projects. How was that determined? Was that just an architectural choice? Was PTA and site council at that school, consulted? I mean, it's just a broader question, how the site plan was done back 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, this all has to be updated, right, about how the master plans were done.
Maybe that could be a feature.
So that I'm writing that into this
Yeah.
agenda item here. This could be a nice, guest presentation at the next
But
meeting.
making sure site councils and PTAs at the local schools, as a side note, would be awesome. So that they know they might have some skin in the game to come to board meetings and actually make a dent in their school progress if they want for that plan, for this kind of restaurant. You're gonna have people want to put their hand, and that's natural, and I think that makes sense. The time everybody wants to have it, as I'm saying.
Make a presentation of the master plan of where it came from and where it's potentially going.
Yes.
Would be huge for us to see and to have on our website to have everyone we
Yeah,
know see.
I think that would be a good website one, because you did have to do quite a little digging, and that should be viewable by the public and advertised.
I don't think it's even available. Yeah,
No, it's.
but it will be. It's not on the current website.
It's not on ours, but I believe it is available as a public
You can
website.
go.
Okay, duly noted as an agenda item for the next one, and Carl, the two Carls will take it up for the website on our committee, the Carl and Carl committee. Any other agenda items for the next meet? I do have one more, by the way, which is we do need to review the report, which is not yet authored for fiscal 21-22. The committee needs to produce a report. Whatever we decided in your motion, Carl, we just put this one forward, right? So now we need one that this committee writes for fiscal 21-22. And we should, now that the audit reports are done, we should write that report and review it at the next meeting. Does that sound correct?
Is that a meeting to do the report to review? Is that an internal meeting? That was my question.
Well, let's talk through, since this committee with the folks we have on right now has not actually ever authored the annual report. We could talk through briefly what the process is to author it and then bring it to the committee in the public forum to approve it and pass and release it.
So our bylaws note that the committee chair shall prepare or cause to be prepared a final written report.
Which section is that? 'Cause
6A, just saying.
Well,
no, I read that differently. Just, I'm sorry to be a pain in the butt. The first sentence says the committee shall prepare regular reports. A report shall be issued at least once a year, right? So that refers to the committee. Then below it says upon completion of all projects authorized by the bond measure, the chair shall prepare. So that to me is at the end of T.
Okay.
So I was thinking that the first part of the annual report is prepared by the committee and the final, how do you read it?
Sounds good to me.
How do you get the whole committee to prepare a report?
Well, so the district offers us administrative and technical support. I'm sure they could help by providing at least soft copies of some of the things from the last report, like the letter, and then we can work from there and update. If you look at the old one, right, it has basically all the reports that have already been provided to us and then a letter.
But I guess it's a matter of us seeing if we want to keep the content, keep the time.
And there may be new content to bring in
Totally.
or, so I'd like to suggest that a subcommittee be formed to write the report.
Motion.
I'm not moving. I don't think we have to have a motion on it. But since you're actively engaged in this discussion, Jitpal, would you be interested in being on the authoring committee? I'm not trying to twist anyone's arm, but
How was this written? Did Michael do every part of this? Did the board help? Did Will help? How did it get created?
great question. Thank you. Does anyone know? John, do you know? Do you know how this was prepared, John?
Prepared, it was prepared, and Priscilla at the time, was the previous CTO, and also Olivia, and then also we had help from council. We brought in those entities along with the chair, and I think he had another person. We viewed minutes of the meetings. Of everything that was done too.
I mean, most of it, if you were to copy what's here, 99% of it, we've already seen. It's the audit reports, it's the budget expenditure, it's a summary of the meetings that happened, and then there's kind of the letter on top of it. So if you were to just do exactly what's here, really the effort is just assembling the materials, which I'm sure the district could help with. There is a section here that summarizes the work that was done during the period. I don't even know if that even needs to be in there. Maybe it's good for the public to see.
I think it already exists from the board reports that happened.
So it's really what the subcommittee needs to do is to agree what the content should be, give an outline of those to the district so those materials can be compiled, and then basically author the one-page letter that goes on the front.
Would there be any different content, or could we just say same content, update it?
If this is still measure T, the content should actually not, it should stay the same, and we're only making the changes thus far, correct? So I believe any of these follow-up meetings that we've seen with budgetary numbers would probably the only two things that would change would be the numbers, I'm assuming.
The numbers for the fiscal year 21.
Right.
Yeah, like this one, it hasn't.
Just changing and reporting.
So you could, I think that one option is to certainly do exactly what you said. Another option would be to do that and maybe supplement some additional public awareness that wasn't in this report. For example, the change orders, the 10% above whatever they were called.
Futility.
The futility, the report on those, the so there could be some additional transparency inserted beyond based on what we've learned tonight.
Yes, I agree. Thank you, but we were to do as we asked questions tonight. I think also for Carolyn, I don't know how you feel about that. But...
Well, I think the ones that have been completed, completion date 5/25/2018, those come out. The ones that are in here that, estimated completion, we confirm the date and the budget, maybe a fresh picture. And to Carl's point, attach the audit and then write a new letter. So it's kind of refresh and repeat.
But would you like to include some of the content at the end that we asked for, like the percent changes?
I don't think that needs to be part of the report because this is a higher level and we're just talking like the budget and then the expenditure. So the change orders would be included in the expenditure, but essentially it looks like what we're saying in this is the project finished and did it come in on time, under budget, that type of thing. Not the change orders, probably just for us to review on it.
Okay.
And there is an audit included in here, and to have any analysis outside of that audit would it could create a conflict between that information. Relying on professionals in their opinion.
Thank you. And Olivia, you have the template, correct? It might be the template.
But you have a Word doc or something that he sent you. Okay. So I think once again, to kind of scope what this subcommittee, or it could just be one individual steps up, would basically outline what needs to change from what's in here so the district can prepare, obviously, fresh reports, the correct audit report, any new information that we're requesting, which sounds like there isn't any beyond what we've already reviewed. And then just summarize, and there is a section here where the meetings are covered that happened during that fiscal year. I'm sure Olivia could provide a quick outline of what meetings happened, who attended. Did we get our 4 meetings in? Maybe that there were, I don't recall. So, and then it's just updating the letter.
So in the meeting section, I would request that we also include the site visits. It's a report of our activities for the year, and I think the committee did go do site visits, and I think that's important for the public to know.
You did them in 21, 22?
We did.
Yes.
'Cause I remember when 22 in the fall, did you do them last school year too?
We did.
Yeah, some of us did.
Okay.
And they were actually, I think, noticed as public meetings as well.
So we're still preparing the report for 21, 22, which is prior to our
term.
some of, you're
Yes.
exactly.
Some for the new members, so yes. So I think the four of us, correct me if I'm wrong, it was Carl, Jit Paul, myself, and Jen that were on the committee during part of that fiscal year, not the whole thing. We joined somewhere along the way.
June.
Our first meeting was September of 21, so we did miss a few months of but I think the term date starts. Does anyone, Olivia, do you have it handy when what at board? When the four of us actually were approved by the board, was it June of 21?
Yeah.
Okay, so the four of us were on for that, so I think the responsibility should naturally fall to us to write the report. I mean, I'm happy to be on this. Would anyone like to work with me?
Yeah, that's fine. I mean, a majority of this is actually gonna come from the board.
Yes.
right?
Well, from the district, we'll provide the materials. We just
Yes.
need to outline if there's anything new that we want and then just update the letter.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Is the district publishing it? Meaning, are they doing the content?
Well, it's more of an assembly. I mean, if you look through this, it's the budget report that the district already prepares and shares with us. It's the audit reports we just reviewed. So those are, we already have. So I think, is it a technical question like who builds the PDF? Is that your question?
Basically.
I'm pretty good at Adobe. So
It could be either us or I think Olivia had to pull this one together because Michael was gone already. Okay, so one of the two of us work together. Our objective will be to bring. What's that?
Michael.
The
Okay.
letter,
The report wasn't good because of the lack of form about the.
So the June meeting didn't even got canceled, but I thought we had to edit something in this, Olivia. So if you could check, I think there's a Word doc for this, at least for the letter. Anyway,
He sent that to us.
Yeah. Yeah. So Jen and I will take this on, and our objective is to have a draft report for approval at our next meeting in 3 months.
Can we get the 4 attachments?
Yeah. Why don't you and let's come up with a list of all the attachments we want, and we'll just consolidate it to Rick, and I'm sure his crack team will pull it all together for us. So plan to review the report in advance when it's published, 3 days in advance, review it, and then we'll hopefully approve it at the next meeting. How's that sound? And we'll be back on our regular schedule. Okay, just to close out this topic, sorry, any other topics for the next agenda? Okay, we're about to adjourn, but first we wanted to get a brief update from the district on something that we obviously are passionate about, which what's happening with Measure S. So there's 2 items on the agenda here. One, a report on bond issuance, and a second, a report on bond project selection. So Rick, do you want to provide an update on these?
Sure.
on
I'm just
S?
gonna kind of put it all together as one item.
Yep, perfect.
7.1 and 7.2. At this time, we don't have a bond issuance date. We are meeting with our financial advisors next week to try and determine that. So we would have more information to report out in the future. And at this point, only Dr. Baker and I have discussed the process of prioritization and project selection, and we have not started that process yet. So that will be upcoming starting in June and over the summer.
and is there litigation?
There was litigation that was dismissed this week. And now we're waiting to see the next steps.
How long does the process typically take if you decide, until money is in the account, roughly?
From when we decide to sell?
Yeah.
Depending on when that is, it's very shortly after the sale date. It's not very long at all. So if we were ready to go out in 3 weeks, we'd probably have the money in 4 weeks.
Got it. Okay. I forgot to mention at the outset, but just so everybody recalls this, that the board expanded the scope, passed a resolution to expand the scope of the Measure T CBOC to include Measure S. I think everyone is aware of that. There is one CBOC. The scope is to cover both bonds, and we've actually removed, correct me if I'm wrong, Cameron, any reference to any specific bond from the bylaws. So this is the Citizens Bond Oversight Committee for any bond that would fall under the purview of such oversight. So anybody have any commentary on that or comfortable with that moving forward?
Any new name tag?
New name tags, yes. Remove the Measure T for the next meeting from the name cards. Okay. Any other questions on Measure S from anybody?
There's no information to really talk about, right? So we'll just wait.
Nothing to talk about.
There's that out there.
You're welcome to look at that. I'm not going to get with you on that. That's fine. Okay.
It's been the motion dismissed granted. Is that status?
Correct, but. This way.
Yeah.
Just let us know.
Okay, is there anything else before we adjourn the meeting? I just want to say, I think this has been a really great meeting. I appreciate the participation from everybody here. It seems like everyone was really engaged and active and had looked at the materials and had great questions. And thanks again to the district for bringing additional stuff. So anybody want a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Seconded over here. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. We are adjourned until August something. But